Microphone's on. There we go. Members, I'd like to call the Minnesota State Senate Jobs and Economic Growth, Finance, and Policy Committee to order. Today is Thursday, March 23rd, 2023. We have two bills on the agenda. One is going to take a shorter amount of time than the other, but I'm always proud to have others come to the committee and present to the committee, and I want to remind the committee that Senator Port is at the table and for us to ask as many questions as you like. We want to make sure that she really feels the pain. No, that's it. We really appreciate you. And then once we deal with this bill, we would then go to Senator Mann, who has 0002, or Senate File 2, all right? And we do have a quorum. So with that, I am bringing forth Senate File 2200, Senator Port. This is a women's venture appropriation to establish a business expansion program for women food entrepreneurs. Once everyone knows that once the author gives their overview, they can take as much time as they need or want in order to make sure that we are in a good place. Her testifiers only have 2 minutes each, and we are pretty strict around those 2 minutes each, and especially tonight because we will be talking about paid family and medical leave tonight. So with that being said, and everyone is set, I am now calling on the great Senator Port to talk about Senate File 2200. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. And I think after my 12 cannabis hearings, it's pretty hard to rattle me with questions now. So I feel like I can handle this one. Good evening, members. I'm delighted to be here with you to present Senate File 2200 to support and grow the advancement of women farmers, cottage food producers, and food entrepreneurs throughout the process of expanding into full-fledged business owners. In the portion of Senate File 2200 under the jurisdiction of your committee, you can focus on Section 1. The bill appropriates $3 million in each fiscal year 24 and 25 through the Commissioner of Deed to WomenVenture to support business expansion and stabilization for women food entrepreneurs across Minnesota. From an auntie's table that is always open to anyone in the neighborhood, to church basement dinners, to leftovers sent home with visitors, to freezer meals dropped off in times of crisis, feeding our communities is in the blood of Minnesota women. In many places across the state, women are making ends meet by becoming cottage food producers. They're feeding their neighbors and providing ingredients for local products through small farming operations. But women, especially women of color, are often left out of investments in growing their small operations into sustainable, stable, wealth-building enterprises. Enter WomenVenture. I'll let them speak for themselves, but I'm incredibly honored to sit here today and ask you to invest in their work. The loans, forgivable loans, and grants that will be provided with the money you invest will help to do additions, alterations, remodeling, and renovations on rented spaces, inventory or supplies, machinery, equipment purchases, working capital, and debt refinancing. A relatively small investment from the state can help to greatly expand the reach and potential of women entrepreneurs across our state. And I do just want to thank our smallest little supporters, Eleanor and Isla, who are here to help us today. And then, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I would like to turn over to our testifiers.
Thank you so much for those opening statements, and certainly we can hear from your testifiers. Which one would you like to go first?
I'll have Leanne go first.
All right, Leanne, will you state your name for the record, and then also who you're with, and give us your 2 minutes of testimony. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Leanne Rasajak. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the CEO of WomenVenture. Chair Champion and members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today regarding Senate File 2200. For the past 45 years, WomenVenture's mission is to empower women to achieve their economic goals by creating sustainable and profitable businesses. WomenVenture is a U.S. Small Business Administration designated women's business center, one of 3 in the state, and we are a community development financial institution. During the pandemic, we deployed more than $10 million in COVID relief funding in partnership with Minnesota Deed and Hennepin County, in addition to thousands of hours of training and consulting across the state of Minnesota and in western Wisconsin. Our role is to level the playing field for women entrepreneurs who face unique obstacles in business, specifically those who are economically and socially disadvantaged. WomenVenture serves clients in each of the committee's districts and beyond. We have seen tremendous growth and demand in new and existing businesses, particularly in food production, manufacturing, and distribution among women and people of color. This is due in large part of life disruption and changes. Some left the restaurant industry to go out on their own, others looking to supplement income to maintain lifestyle during economic uncertainty, and new consumer demands, including gluten-free, nut-free, supporting new food growth categories and innovation. We see ourselves as a solution to a long-standing equity issue for underrepresented and underserved businesses. Investing in women entrepreneurs expands and diversifies our state's small business economy, providing broad economic resilience that is fundamental to Minnesota's future. We seek to close racial and economic gaps through this work to generate wealth and prosperity. Today, there are 8,000 registered cottage food producers. We see an opportunity to provide the resources needed at this stage in the entrepreneur's journey, as there is no one in our existing food resource ecosystem that can close that gap and meet people in the middle. And we want to move them from startup to accelerator and beyond. There is demand around makers, restaurateurs, bakers, and retailers, and we see distribution via farmers markets, digital channels, retail food shelves, through the clients in which we've helped to support thus far.
And to wrap up,
thank you for your time and consideration of the Bill 2200 in supporting food entrepreneurs, both emerging and existing across our state.
thank you, Ms. Rasicek. Just so the folks know that there's information in your packets about WomenVenture, and if there's any additional information that you want us to have, written information, we'll be happy to distribute it to the committee, because we want to make sure that everything you want us to know, that we know. So thank you for being with us. And now we'll go to Vanessa Drews, who's the founder and owner of Cheesecake Funk. The only problem is I don't see any cheesecake in this room tonight. So, Ms. Drews.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you all. My name is Vanessa, and I'm the owner of Cheesecake Funk. At the end of 2019, I decided to step away from my 20-year career as a senior paralegal at Robbins Kaplan Law Firm. I decided to step away because I wanted to venture off and start my own business. By doing so, I invested in myself by honestly using some of my 401k that I had built up for the past 20 years in order to get the supplies I needed, the equipment I needed. I started baking out of a commercial kitchen, and then March 1st of 2020 was my first day at my new kitchen. At that time, I was supplying to restaurants across the Twin Cities. 16 days later, on March 16th, restaurants shut down. So because of that, I had no customers whatsoever. And after that, I just didn't know what I was going to do in order to maintain my livelihood. So I took about a month off. I tried to get assistance through state entities, federal entities, but because I'm a licensed wholesale food manufacturer, I didn't welcome groups of people into my facility, so I have never been qualified for any kind of aid because I'm not a restaurant. So because of that, I've just had to hustle and make ends meet, and I'm super proud of myself that I transformed my website, so now I currently bake out of the Minneapolis Marriott Southwest Hotel in Minnetonka. People can pre-order through my website, and then they let me know the date and time they want to pick up, and then I have it ready at the hotel for them. It's a different kind of avenue of growing a business, but I had no other option whatsoever. The only kind of shining light has been WomenVenture. They were the first organization that has helped me during COVID.
And
so,
if you wrap up, that'd be great.
And I'm just super excited to say that just because of all my hard work, WomenVenture has also helped me just get everything organized on my end. And last week, I closed on my first home for me and my children.
We are excited about that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Members, I just want to remind you that we also have Senator Housley, who is joining us by Zoom, so that's where our other member is as well. So we wanted to make sure that we mention that. Members, any questions for Senator Port or any one of the testifiers before we lay this bill over for possible inclusion in our omnibus bill? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm just going to offer a tired old concern, and that goes to the 10% administrative cost. I don't know that we need to have $600,000 of a $6 million request going to administrative costs. And I hope we continue to push back on these. We want the state funds going out to help those who are in need and have philanthropy pick up the operations cost for many of these nonprofits. At least that's a hope that I have. And also to make sure that we are keeping a tab on it would be nice to know how much was going to technical assistance and how much was going to administration versus having one lump sum.
Any feedback, or would we like to go to our next testifier? Next question. Ms. Rosacek.
Yes, thank you for the question, Senator Pratt, and I'm happy to answer. In terms of the $600,000 spread across the biennium that's currently in the proposed plan, the focus is to be able to help to support technical assistance. Now, many nonprofits and CDFIs like ourselves, everything is manual. The majority of our loan servicing, our client follow-up, has very little automation and technology to be able to serve more people. So right now, what we would do with a component of those funds is to help to better operationalize so that we can reach and serve more business owners and entrepreneurs across the state. Our current footprint service area is 16 county region. Since we pivoted to virtual, we're able to serve a broader set across the state of Minnesota and beyond. The ability for us to meet the current demand and the queue that is both in our lending pool as well as in our courses and training, this funding helps to support that work so that we can reach more entrepreneurs and small business owners who are in need, and that's across industries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Mohammed.
Thank you, Chair. So this is one-time money? Correct?
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Mohammed, yes.
And have
Senator
they,
Mohammed.
thank you, Chair. And have you guys received money before?
Thank you for the question.
Ms. Rosacek, you have to go through the chair. There we go. Senator Rosacek.
Thank you, Chair and Senator Mohammed. We have not received funding in the past for this initiative. Most funding that we've received has been through Minnesota DEED for all kind of programs and training that we develop, so it's spread across industries. This is the first time we've come with a focused effort around food and emerging entrepreneurship.
Follow-up, Senator Mohammed.
And then can you tell me a little bit about how you all distribute the money from, particularly to women who own businesses, from women of color to other folks? How does the equity, what does that look like?
Yes.
Ms. Rosacek.
Thank you, Chair. The ability for us to distribute typically goes through an application process. And so as an example, we have funded nearly $2 million in loan funds this fiscal year. They go through an application process in which we do have dedicated full-time employees to loans, loan review. We go through personal finance as well as business finance to then determine the loan amount, and that is often informed by, what the business owner is telling us. There's also technical assistance that goes along with when we provide funding to the loans to ensure that we're helping to build business credibility and that they are successful in the overall loan program. We currently serve 95% women. Of the clients that we serve, nearly 50% identify as BIPOC. Thank you for your question.
Any follow-up?
Okay. No, can you maybe tell us a little bit about the administrative costs, exactly what it does? Because I think I share the same concerns that Senator Pratt does.
Ms. Rosacek.
Yes, thank you. The question around administrative costs and fees. So we did talk about, we have a staff of 30 full-time employees currently serving our volume. We do anticipate that should this funding go through, we are going to experience a continued influx in clients to serve. This would allow us to quickly scale up via contract resources as well as full-time employees to be able to meet that need. In addition, there would be technology enhancements that we would make both from a reporting standpoint, but as well as servicing loans and overall client services. Currently, as an example, everything is on a manual process via email and email follow-up. If we have the ability to improve our infrastructure to be able to meet more people in an automated fashion so that we are spending more of our time on the technical assistance and on the counseling, that helps to expand our services even broader. And those admin costs, that's what the majority of that would go towards.
Senator Mohammed,
And is there a cap of how much money each business receives from you?
Ms. Rasacek.
Yes, thank you for that question. In terms of loans, we have a current cap of $100,000 in which we're able to lend to each business. In terms of grants, there is not an existing cap. For context, we have provided grants up to $10,000. We have also provided, our average loan size is roughly $30,000 per client. The life of a loan is typically 5 years. Thank you.
Any other questions for the testifiers or the author? Seeing none, before we lay Senate File 2200 on the table for possible inclusion, we always allow the chief author to give any final statements or comments that they have. Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I appreciate your consideration for this. I think supporting women-owned businesses across Minnesota and helping the women who are supporting their families in small cottage foodways right now, helping them grow into full-fledged, profitable businesses that help spread wealth to their families and to the next generation is a critical piece that our state does not invest enough in. And so I hope you'll consider our proposal.
Thank you so very much. With that, Senate File 2200 is laid on the table for possible inclusion. We will now proceed to Senate File number 2. We'll ask Senator Mann and her testifiers to come to the table.
Chair,
Senator Joyhan.
I don't see our handouts that people submitted letters that we normally get printed out and put in our packets. Are they around? And
I believe that Senator Joyhan,
maybe I didn't dig far
I am
enough.
seeing a big packet of information right here. Do you not have that? Does everyone have this big packet of information? There's the information, Senator Joyhan. You're more than welcome. How are we going to proceed tonight with Senate File number 2? The author is going to give some opening statements. We're going to get some high-level things about the bill that'll be brief but to the point, and then we will go through the amendment that you have, and then once we deal with that amendment, then we'll go to the other amendments around the table.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Senator Nelson.
just before we get started, my packet does not have any of the letters in it that my superintendents turned in. So maybe I'm looking in the
Do we
wrong
not?
place, but I am not seeing them in that packet.
Let's see, because I do see a letter from like the chamber,
The Rochester Chamber.
and then I see an article, I see something also from NFIB. And is there a particular letter that you're looking for, Senator Nelson, that
Yes,
we can help make
Mr.
sure?
Chair, I'll go have my staff make copies and bring them down here. I don't see it. Some of my superintendents sent copies. So I'll take care of that on my end. My apologies, Mr. Chair.
No problem. If you have some other letters that you would like for the committee to have, as I often mention to everyone, please feel free to bring that down and we'll make sure that it's distributed, okay? Thank you, Senator Nelson. So the roadmap again is our author will give some opening statements, some brief opening statements as to what she believes she needs to say, and then we will have high-level, brief discussion about what's in the bill, and then we'll get to the author's amendment and wrestle with that, and then after that's decided upon, then we'll go to amendments around the table. That's the process that Senator Draheim and I talked about, and I wanted to make sure I honor that process. And then, after we deal with those amendments, we will go to the fiscal note so that we can be clear as to any fiscal implications, and the committee will be able to answer any and all questions. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a procedural question. I believe we weren't taking testimony on this bill tonight. Is that correct?
That is correct. Any questions related to fiscal, finance, you can certainly ask. We also have a representative here from the Legislative Budget Office. I think we also have someone here from DEED, if you're there. Okay, DEED is here. Anyone that you can have them come up and answer any questions as it pertains to that. But to the general public, we are not taking testimony from the general public.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd ask why Ms.
Senator
Fitzpatrick is at
Pratt.
the testifier's table.
Say it one more time.
I would ask why Ms. Fitzpatrick is at the testifier's table.
From my understanding, she's sharing her stream so they can go over the changes that's been made to the bill itself. And she's worked along with Senator Mann.
Mr. Chair, we've all been working with people outside the legislature. I I think we can have a stream or something be done, but if we're going to hold no testifiers and no outside people at the testifiers table, I think we have to be consistent on both the pro and the con side.
So, Senator Pratt, I'm always interested in being fair, but if we want to know what's in the bill, she's not testifying as to whether it's good or bad. She's only testifying to what's there. So I will not have anyone, she will not be able to speak to whether it's good or bad. It is just simply to say what's in the bill. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have Senate counsel that can walk us through the amendment, what's in the bill, don't we?
We do, but I will look to the author, because from my understanding, Senate Council is totally prepared to do that. But if we wanted to allow fluidity, I'm willing to do that. Senator Mann, what do you think about Senate Council going through the amendment or the changes?
So I am prepared to go over the amendment, Mr. Chair. I was just, Ms. Fitzpatrick is here just to go over briefly, again, just what the program looks like and the big points in the bill. And she has a PowerPoint presentation with 4 slides to do that, and that is all. And then she will go back.
Chair?
Hold on one second. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I would suggest that Ms. Fitzpatrick can give us that PowerPoint as everyone else has done, or she can give the PowerPoint to our pages, and they can run through the PowerPoint. Senator Mann can. I just want to be consistent across the board.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ditto Senator Pratt's comments. I think that's only fair. Everybody else had to give handouts, and I'm sure the other people, not only that are here, but that would have been here, could have also added to comments to what's in the bill, quote unquote, on behalf of the general public. I don't think it's fair for one side to have someone here and those that might think differently not. And as long as we're talking about it, and I'm sure it was just an error about submitting letters to the committee for only supportive letters. And I'm sure it was just an oversight, but I did get some correspondence for people wondering if their comments would be published or not. So I think with that being said, I think we have to kind of abide by what you said and not have anybody up there.
So Senator Pratt and Senator Draheim, your point is well taken. So what I'm going to do is have Senator Mann kind of go through it. She's fully capable, so I have no problem as far as that's concerned. Number two, because I don't want anything to get in the way of us having this robust discussion, because I don't want us to get hung up on semantics or anything else. I'm one who's always fair and equitable, because that's a guiding principle of mine. Last but certainly not least, what was put on the website, we did see that and we did correct that, because he should not have put anything just asking for letters of support. And I guess he being the CA who's able to speak for himself, but I know his value system, he just wanted to put something out there saying, if you have anything, give it. But by just only having support letters as opposed to letters, that would cause a little consternation. But we think that this program is important, and it's important for us to discuss in real time. And with that, I'm ready to go forward, because I can't wait to hear about all the work that has been done up to this particular point, because from my understanding, there's been a number of committees that this bill has gone through, and we're now on, what's the, number 83? When we think in terms of the amendment, is a number of amendments. With that, Senator Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I am very happy to be back in this committee today after a continued conversation with stakeholders and months of daily conversations. You will notice that I am carrying fewer bills than many of my colleagues, because I've been working on this bill every single day. Briefly, paid family medical leave program has a very long list of benefits, including better maternal health outcomes, better infant health outcomes, better parental mental health outcomes, decreased gender disparities in the workplace, economic stabilities for families, decreased reliance on government services, increased employee retention and productivity, and increased engagement in the workforce. And we have robust data that speaks to all of those things. This will impact our child care workforce shortage, our long-term care workforce shortage, and our healthcare system. And of course, we have written the bill in such a way that there is equitable distribution of benefits. And that is why, Mr. Chair, that is the why. That is the why we are doing this. Because rarely is there such a program that positively impacts so many aspects of our lives. I have spent the time since I was last here speaking to business owners, from the smallest of businesses with a handful of workers to, or less, to massive businesses like our Targets and Best Buys. I've had conversations with agricultural sectors, hospitality, restaurants, businesses that provide goods, businesses that provide services, healthcare industry, education, insurance companies, seasonal businesses like many of our friends at the State Fair, for example. I've had conversations with unions. I've spoken to people in the metro area, greater Minnesota, and everything in between. And I have gotten advice and language recommendations from employee protection lawyers, employer protection lawyers, and of course, our members. And lastly, I have spoken to the workers across the state of Minnesota to come up with what you have in front of you today, which is the A83. So today, Mr. Chair, we can go over a brief overview of the bill once again, or we can walk through the amendment, whatever, however you would like to proceed. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Mann, for that opening statement. So, Senator Mann, you have amendment, the A83 amendment, is that right?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Senator Gustafson, are you okay with the motion for the committee to adopt the A83 amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, so moved.
Mr.
so-
Chair, I do have a small oral amendment to the A83.
All right. Please identify the oral amendment.
So on, let me pull it up here. On lines 2.13 and 2.14, I would just like to delete those.
So the Senate Counsel, Ms. Carleen Dole-Fontaine, will report the oral amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members, and Senator Mann, in addition to that, there is one technical correction for a citation that's incorrect, that was a typo. So let me just, that's on line 1.28. Delete 286.046 and insert 268.046. And then on page 2, delete lines 13 and 14.
All right. The amendment, that is Senator Gustafson's amendment, is for us to adopt and pass the A83. So Senator Mann, can you go through that A83 so that we can have any discussion related to the A83? Senator Mann.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So starting at the top, page 1, line 17, we added incapacitated person, as we added this definition later on in the bill. On line 22, we added the Department of Commerce to be in the conversation with Deed and Dolly, since they will have some oversight into the private plans. On line 84, again, just adding the Department of Commerce there. On page 8, line 18, we added language to make it easier for employers to opt out of the program and still have accurate wage information for the employees. On line 20, we deleted the word pregnancy to make sure that we are lining up the language with the intent of the bill. On page 9, line 4, we added the construction industry, since we heard from our stakeholders that they operated in a slightly different manner, and this language adapts to their sector. Page 9, line 30, added definition of seasonal employee. Page 10, line 10, after 12, we added the Board of Commissions and tax-paying employer to the definition of employer, after hearing from stakeholders who did not feel that they were confidently included. Line 18, we changed the definition of self-employment income to include the last 1 year of employment versus the last 2 years. This was changed in response to member concerns regarding the length of that look back. Page 10, subdivision 19 was deleted. Initially, we had 2 separate monetary accounts to hold premiums and fines, but this was felt to be not necessary in the state program with conversation with the departments. Page 11, 16, or lines 11 through 16 were deleted and replaced to make the definition of family more clear and remove the affinity language that several businesses and several members had concerns about. Page 11, line 29, we added podiatrists to the list of medical health providers since we heard from them that they performed a lot of surgeries that require a lot of time off. And we also added mental health professionals to the definition of healthcare provider because often they are the ones who are going to be seen in cases of things like physical abuse or substance use recovery services. Page 12, line 22, again, remove the word pregnancy to line up the rest of the bill. We cleaned up the definition of self-employed individual on page 13, line 20 and 21. Page 14, lines 1 and 7, we added language to make the definition of serious health condition more clear and align more closely with FMLA. Page 15, we added language to make it clear that your benefits cannot exceed your wage. Page 16, subdivision 45, align the definition of wages to the UI definition for familiarity, done for our business community to make reporting easier. Page 19, line 28, we added language that ensures that employees are hired, that the employees who are hired to run the program are appropriately classified. Page 20, after line 9, we added language borrowed from the Frontline Workers Program so that we can stand up the system quickly and without barriers. This provision does have a sunset, and this helps to ensure a timely implementation of the program. Page 20, subdivision 2 was deleted. This was redundant language from UI that did not make sense in the context of PFML. On page 21, we added language so that people can apply for the program 60 days in advance. So for example, if you're having a baby, you can apply well in advance with your estimated due date to make the paperwork burden a little bit less. On page 21, line 27, we changed the time allowed for reconsideration of termination from 24 to 12 months. On page 23, line 3, it's a technical change correcting the subdivision. Page 23, subdivision 5, lays out the maximum length of benefits that has been decreased in response to business owner concerns about employees being off from work. Page 23, line 14 and 16, we made the definition of the minimum period more clear. Page 24 and page 25, this is clarifying language to match eligibility requirements with the intent of the bill. Page 25, we also added language that clarifies what a 7-day qualifying event is. And clarifying what information the certification needs.
Madam, excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Senator Nelson?
Just a brief comment, Mr. Chair. Well, just to the run-through here. It's very difficult, Mr. Chair and Senator Mann. I know you have a list of what those things are, but we are looking at the language. And so it'd be really helpful, instead of just saying clarified or we change the number of weeks, it'd be really helpful to know to what. So I'm just hoping, I know we're about halfway through here, but perhaps as the author goes through, if she could provide a little context to what is being spoken so very quickly as we're looking in the legislation, so we can make sure when we discuss this in its most current form.
Mr. Chair.
That's well taken. And Senator Mann, it might help them also when you're going through it, like even on the pages, like if you say, if you look at line 4.15, we changed blah, 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 whatever it is, right? So that they can follow along on the amendment, because it seems like that's what she is having a concern about as well.
Say that last part again, Mr. Chair.
So like, for an example, as you go through with your notions, like when you talk about maximum length of benefits and how that was changed, if they're following along on the amendment, that's line 4.7 to 4.10. Because it sounds like they're saying they're getting confused and not following exactly where those things are in the amendment.
Got it, Mr. Chair. And then my only other comment is if I went through the exact details, I would have to read the bill and then read the amendment. We're going to be here for the next 8 hours, which is fine. I'm just saying.
I don't think, well, what I think is being said, that we'll still keep time down, is if you, if like, for an example, if there's a change, you know, in, let's say, after care, you inserted or and deleted everything after bonding. I mean, even though that's a small change, but it's because we felt like this is why that was changed.
Got
You
it.
know, and just keep going that way. Because the rate in which you are going through it is fine, because we will get through it. I just want to make sure that no one can say they didn't quite understand where or what you were speaking to.
Got it, Mr. Chair. I'll also speak a little slower, because I think I was talking kind of fast. Where was I?
You were at, I think, if I'm correct, I think you were at line 4.15, where you're talking about the minimum duration to receive benefits under this chapter in one workday a week? Or just
Yes.
deleting everything after that? But you're right, you can just go to the boulder and other things. We don't mean to throw you off, I just want to be responsive to
That's totally
Senator
fine.
Nelson.
So in that particular place, 4.15, we decreased the minimum duration to a full workday instead of hours to make that much more clear for the employer. On page 24, lines 23 and 24, this is language to match eligibility requirements with the intent of the bill. And so we took out I have to look at the bill to see what words we took out. We took out pregnancy or recovery from pregnancy for the period required because pregnancy is already covered under, or recovery from pregnancy is covered under serious health condition, and it was not our intent to just take time off for a healthy pregnancy. Page 25, line 7, which is 4.22 of the amendment, language that clarifies that a 7-day qualifying event has to be 7 consecutive days unless it is intermittent leave. Page 25, line 16, which is 4.24 of the amendment, is language to clarify what the certification needs to include, and that is spelled out in the amendment there for you. Page 23, 25, again deleting that pregnancy language. Page 26, line 11, which is 5.5 of the amendment, clarifies who can provide documentation for safety leave. We removed the word volunteer so that it has to be an employee of the agency. Page 26, line 17, which is 5.7 of the amendment, removes the option for a reduced schedule leave. We heard a lot of concerns about this option from businesses because it would be very difficult to schedule people just for an hour here or there, so we took away that option. Page 26, lines 27 through 31, which is 5.8 in the amendment, clarifies that an employee can use vacation time, PTO, or disability insurance in lieu of PFML benefits. This was a response to, again, businesses and counties and cities having employees with a lot of PTO time, so we wanted to make sure that they had that option. Page 29, line 10, which is 521, clarifies that an incomplete application can be given more time in order for all the information to be collected instead of immediately denied. Page 29, after line 24, which is 527 in the amendment, added language to clarify that family leave is for one person at a time, unless the incapacitated person is a child. Page 31, line 8, just renaming of a section, and that was 530 of the amendment. Page 31, line 17, which is 6.3 of the amendment, again removes that reduced scheduled language. Page 31 is line 30 to 32, which is 6.4 on the amendment, is language so that the employer can request documentation or certification from the employee, and the employee does have to provide that to the employer as well. Page 32, line 14, which is 6.16, clarifies bonding leave taken for the placement of a child can be used before the child arrives in specific situations. This is very common language used in other states. The rest of page 32 is just a bunch of cleanup and technical changes. Page 33, line 21, which is 6.29 of the amendment, adds language from the trades to waive the continued health insurance provision since their health insurance structure is different than the usual employer-employee relationship. Page 35, line 19, which is 7.17, clarifies that while employees on leave are entitled to certain work protections and benefits, they are not entitled to bonus payments made to other employees because they had that increased workload because of their leave. And that was brought to our attention by one of our members. Page 35, after line 27, which is 7.20 on the amendment, clarifies that only after 90 days do employees have job protection if and when leave is taken. We also added the construction industry language here since their contracts don't fit into this structure as far as returning to the same job. Page 37, line 20, 7.31 makes it clear that businesses can opt out of the program and offer benefits that go above and beyond what the state is offering. Page 37, line 21, subdivision 2, which is 8.1, makes it easier for the employer who has opted out of the state program to get appropriate or accurate wage information. Subdivision 3 aligns the benefit payouts with the employer payroll timing to make the process more seamless and easier for the employer. And subdivision 4 adds surety bond language to private plans that offer PFML, and this provides financial protections to Minnesotans if their company cannot pay their bills. Pages.
Mr. Chair, when do you want questions about the amendment? When, as we get through the end?
At the end.
Thank you.
Once the author goes through, then you will be allowed to ask questions in that discussion session where we usually do it. Thank you so much. Senator Mann, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pages 37 and 38, again, adding language to add the Commissioner of Commerce, given there's jurisdiction in the private plan. The rest of 38 and 39 is some technical changes, and then we have page 39, line 13. Which adds procedural language to make providing benefits to the employee easier for the employer. And that was line 8.26 on the amendment. Page 39, line 17, which is 9.2 of the amendment, adds language to clarify that private plans need to be approved by the Department of Commerce, and their plans need to be provided by companies in Minnesota. Page 40, 9.8 in the amendment makes it clear that an employee has the same rights of appeal under a private plan as they do under the state plan. Page 40, line 15 adds language so that, and that's 9.12 in the amendment, adds language so that the private plan can make changes if the state plan changes without having to submit a new plan. Page 43, line 2 on 9.14 is language to make clear that a self-employed individual is responsible for the full premium amount. Page 46, line 8, 9.15 in the amendment is language to clarify that the premium is to be split 50-50 between employee and employer. Page 47, line 11, 9.21 puts a clear amount of time in which the premium can be adjusted, and this was a request from the counties. Page 53, subdivision 3 deletes the deleting that second monetary account that I talked about earlier. Page 63, lines 13 to 18 on 9.26 of the amendment. This language was removed that dealt with employers providing independent contractors with written information about the plan. We heard from multiple businesses that this would be very complicated given their structure, and so we just removed that language. And page 64, lines 9 through 11, which is 10.2 of the amendment, is just rewording to make it clear that the employers are allowed to top off a person's benefits and offer benefits outside the program. And that's the amendment, Mr.
That's the
Chair.
amendment. Thank you, Senator Mann, for going through that amendment. Now is the time if you have questions on the A83 amendment.
I do not have a question at this moment,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
All
Thank
right.
you.
If there are no questions, Senator Gustafson renews her motion for us to adopt the A83 amendment. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. No. The amendment is adopted. Any other questions or amendments for Senate File 2 as amended? Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to start by saying that I support paid family and medical leave for every working Minnesotan, because every person should be able to care for themselves or a loved one, to have economic stability, time to bond with a new child, and it's the right thing to do. I also deeply value listening to my constituents and the incredible small business community in my district, especially folks in White Bear Lake that I would all love you to come and visit. They've truly built a special community that provides jobs and so much more. Many of those businesses are very small and family-owned. I'd like to move 2 amendments today that make sure that we move forward with this critically important bill. We also extend a helping hand to small business owners to ensure that we don't leave them behind. So first, Mr. Chair, I would like to move the A78 amendment.
Senator Gustafson moves the A78 amendment. Senator Gustafson, to your amendment, or would you like, you want to go through your amendment?
Mr. Chair, that's fine with me if it's okay with you.
It is certainly fine with me.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The A78 amendment would create a small business wage exclusion for employers with 30 or fewer employees. Their premium is reduced by either $12,500 multiplied by the number of employees or $120,000, whichever is lower. So the benefit would start to phase out for businesses larger than 20 employees. And this amendment would offer thousands of the smallest businesses across the state, helping them out, meeting the requirements of the bill, while it ensures that their employees continue to have access to critical paid family and medical leave benefits. The approach is going to have the largest impact for our smallest businesses, and I would ask for member support.
All right, any questions to the A78 amendment? Senator Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I definitely appreciate trying to give some relief to our smallest employers, but my question is, how does the A78 affect the actuarial value of the plan? In other words, the benefits and the costs and the usage?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is saying that small businesses especially, right, have a deduction in what they have to pay out in their, a contribution to the paid family leave benefit. And so it minimizes what is coming out of their bottom line, if that helps. Sure. I am going to say, Senator Nelson, that any really specific questions that you might have on the amendment should be directed to council, even though I worked with Senator Mann to come up with this, and she was supportive. Council is the one that drafted it, and we'll be able to answer your technical questions a little bit more thoroughly if that's what you're looking for.
Senator Doyle, excuse me, Council, Carlin Doyle Fontaine. To the question whether you know the answer to the actuarial notion.
Mr. Chair, members, Senator Nelson, so if you could repeat your question, you said how will this affect the the actuarial, the premium calculations if they make this exclusion?
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the issue is, in any type of insurance, you have to make sure that the premiums cover the liabilities. All right? So we're doing a good thing here with this particular amendment, and we are lowering those premiums for the small businesses, which are going to be socked with this. But my question is, how does that clearly that must affect the actuarial study of the bill? Because are you going to say then that that some employers don't have quite as many benefits now as this bill describes? So, I mean, the insurance is a very complicated issue, and when you go to ascribing premiums, it must cover the incurred liabilities. So in this bill, we are reducing the premiums. I see that, or this amendment, we're reducing the premiums. Are you reducing the benefits? I guess that's the question. Are the benefits being reduced?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we are not reducing the benefits, and we think from what we see in other states that the impact will not affect the premium. However, we will not know that for sure until we do our actuarial study, which is in the bill, and we will have that done before the program rolls out.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is another spot of good news if we're actually going to have an actuarial study. I believe it's very, it's very dangerous to pass an insurance bill stating what the premiums are going to be and what the benefits are going to be without an actuarial study. So that offers some comfort to know that there's an actuarial study coming. But, Mr. Chair, that brings another question to my mind, which is, if we don't have the actuarial study yet, how do we know what it is? I mean, we have a 64-page fiscal note here. It's the biggest one I think any of us have ever seen around here. The question is, so we have this wonderful fiscal note, but how do we know what the costs are going to be if we don't have the actuarial study yet? That's a bit scary.
I'm sorry, Senator Mann.
Mr.
I didn't
Chair.
mean to cut you off. I thought you were about to finish. I think I got the essence of your question. Senator Mann.
Mr. Chair, Senator Nelson, so the Department of Labor has done several studies on this program in 2015, 2019, and then a more recent one to get us to the numbers that we are now. We have also been using data that we are gathering from other states to come up with those numbers. And so even without the actuarial study, which we would not pass a bill of this magnitude without one, so thank you, our numbers are pretty solid already.
Senator Nelson.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would move that we table this until we have an actuarial study, because we do not allow insurance companies to come in to our state without an actuarial study. That's a very serious thing. You have to know. You have to know what the benefits are. You have to know what the projected liabilities are, and you have to know what the premium is going to be. And I just don't know how we know that without an actuarial study. So it's very concerning.
So, Senator Nelson, are you suggesting that we should table the A78 amendment, or do you want to wait until we get to the underlining bill? And if you want to ask the question or put that motion forward, then we can deal with that in real time. But I think these things should be done in the appropriate place or space. Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chair, you are exactly right. My line of questioning fell from this amendment and what I was learning about that. So we will hold off on that amendment. My apologies. It was the line of questioning that got to that. So I will withdraw my offering an amendment to table this until we have an actuarial study.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator Pratt, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I didn't mean that badly. I was just saying, I see your hand up.
I know,
Senator Pratt.
you sense it. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Gustafson, for bringing this. I appreciate the intent of this amendment. One of the concerns that I've been raising, and unfortunately I wasn't here the first time we were able to review the bill, but I have been concerned about the impact on small business, because if one person is gone out of 4 or 5, it makes a huge difference to the ability to run it. Senator Gustafson, are you aware of any other states that are doing a similar type of buy down for the premium? I share Senator Nelson's concerns that we're providing full benefit for only part of the cost. But I'm wondering if you have any other states that you've modeled this language off of, because it's new to me and unfamiliar.
Senator Gustafson, or we can go to Senator Mann, either one. Senator Gustafson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to defer to Senator Mann. She is the expert at this, and will know the answer.
Senator Mann, to the question.
Wow, the pressure, Mr. Chair. So as far as I know, there is no other state that does it exactly like this. There are several other states that have exempted small businesses or believe paid for a more set number or amount of their premium, but without a phase out like this one.
Senator Pratt, to the A78 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Senator Gustafson or Senator Mann, just to help me explain why we're approaching it in this fashion versus, say, a more clear-cut exemption for small business.
Senator Mann.
Mr. Chair, so the thought behind it was that you can have small businesses of, 5 lawyers or 5 physicians who are very well off financially. And the purpose of this amendment is not to pay the premiums on companies that are very, very wealthy. And so that's why it's a partial wage replacement up to a certain amount, because it really impacts the small businesses with lower wage incomes. And then we have a phase out because we don't want to have a cliff, right? We don't want to prevent someone from hiring that 21st person, for example. So that's the intent behind this structure.
Senator Pratt, to the A78 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I get to my last question, I think you raised an interesting question. So I have a retail shop of 5 people, or I have a law firm of 5 people. And to your point, the law firm, those employees may not need the coverage and would fall under that exemption. I guess I'd ask again, if I've got this small business and other states have exempted them, I'm still trying to understand the approach versus providing an exemption for micro businesses.
Senator Mann, to the question.
Mr. Chair, so Senator Pratt, so again, we tried to have a progressive model of exemption, and we did not want to just fully exempt small businesses who make millions of dollars. Because that happens. And so the approach was to be more progressive and helping the small business with lower wages have more return in their investment, if you will.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And will the employees still be required for their full contribution?
Senator Mann.
Yes.
Senator Pratt.
I'm thinking.
Oh, he's thinking. All right. Any other questions? Senator Mohammed, to the A78 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Senator Gustafson, for bringing this amendment. I support it because, small businesses already have to deal with employees who might need leave, and they either lose those employees or they have to come back to work with them having a baby at home or having to struggle with other things. And so I think that having to give small businesses exception in this is really important. I have small businesses in my district, and they've been asking for this, and so I thank you for bringing this.
One less.
One more question?
No, just one comment. I just want to be very clear.
Okay.
I support giving small businesses a break. They need a break in this bill. My concern about the amendment is it's actuarially unsound. But I definitely believe we need to be giving relief to our small businesses that they do not have to participate in this particular initiative.
Senator Draham, to the A78 amendment.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing the amendment forward, and thank you for working on it. Senator Mann, I think the desired outcome I agree with. I just question, when I look down the list here of other states that have some kind of paid family leave, you have 10 or under is exempt, and then there's a sliding scale for Delaware up to 25 with some tweaks, and then another state 15, another state 25, another state 25, and then Washington with 50 or less. And as a small business person, and have had multiple small businesses above and below those numbers, you know, the complicated paperwork that you're going to instill on these small businesses, and I would agree a law firm probably would have the resources to hire an outside firm to manage that, but most of my area in southern Minnesota are small businesses. We don't have a lot of Fortune 500 companies. We have small businesses. But not only small businesses, we have small forms of government. And we have, you know, a lot of townships, a lot of small cities, and to be honest, some counties that don't have a ton of workers either. So I appreciate the amendment. I appreciate the goal of the amendment. I appreciate the goal of the bill overall. But I think we're making it way too complicated. And I would rather see us, as this moves along, Senator Mann, to just have exemption for small businesses, at least for a time period. So let's start with the big players. Let's get the program working. If this is the route you want to go, you obviously have the votes to do what you want to do. I cannot stop you. But I would encourage you, as this moves forward, that maybe you have a timed implementation of the paid family medical leave. And you start with state employees, and we're exempt for the audience. We are exempt in this, so it's not self-fulfilling here. And then maybe what I think Deed defines as a large corporation or the federal government, which would be 500 or more. So that's what I would encourage. And once again, thanks for bringing the amendment.
All right, seeing no additional discussions on the A78, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe Senator Mann can answer this for me. If, as it stands now, is it 13% of Minnesotans have paid family leave as part of their offer of benefits that they get through their employer or anywhere?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Mann.
So that number has increased over the last several years, and it is now 24. So 24% of Minnesotans have paid family leave.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess that just to sort of speak to what Senator Draheim was saying, that leaves an awful lot of Minnesotans without any option for paid family leave. And so I think just starting with big companies is still leaving out the majority of people who need help. But I'm glad we're all having this conversation in a really civil way. And I also want to thank Senator Mann, too, because you know, I had a concern, and I went to Senator Mann, and she was very supportive, and we worked together on this, which is sort of how I envision good governance to look like. And so I just, again, want to say thank you for being open to some of my concerns. And with that, and maybe this will address some of your concerns across the table here, members, but I would move the A79 amendment.
Senator Gustafson moves the A79 amendment. It's in your packet, is my understanding. Senator Gustafson, to your A79.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The A79 amendment builds upon my prior amendment to offer additional support to small businesses. One concern I've heard from my local businesses is that it will be difficult to replace employees that are on leave, especially for the smallest businesses or smallest government systems. This amendment will enable employers to seek a business assistance grant when more than 15% of their employees are on leave for a given week. That might sound like a high number, but for a 5-employee business, that means any 1 employee being on leave. So for a 10-employee business, that means any 2 employees. The business assistant grant would offer a grant equal to 25% of the on-leave employee's wages for each week, up to $300, combined with the savings from not paying on the on-leave employee's wages while they are on leave. Do you see why I had to write this down? Sorry. This gives considerable flexibility to business owners to hire temporary staff or increase compensation for other current staff. So I feel this is a sound approach to target support to small businesses that could struggle to maintain operation if an employee goes on leave, and I would ask members' support for A79 amendment.
Senator Mann, to the A79, what's your thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's a very good idea, Senator Gustafson. I will say that this bill does not create a need for leave. That need already exists. The passage of this bill will not all of a sudden magically everyone's going to break their leg and not be able to go to work the next day. That's not what's going to happen. We know that because we've seen it in every other state that's passed this. However, again, in an effort to really help out our small businesses, especially new businesses that are just getting started, I think that this bill is a wonderful idea to help them out.
Any other questions about the A79 amendment?
Oh, Mr. Chair.
Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chair, my pen is running out of light, I hate to say, and there's much
Guess what?
night left, so I'm going to have to
Senator
wave my
Nelson,
hand.
Senator Nelson, I'm so happy that pen is running out of light.
I knew you'd
No,
say that.
I'm not. Senator Nelson.
So, I know, seriously, Mr. Chair, well, I want to know who's going to pay for the business grants? Where's the funding for the business assistance grants?
Senator Gustafson or Senator Mann, which one?
Mr. Chair,
Senator Mann.
that money will come from the PFML fund.
Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chair, I would just note that this is one more item then, that we are keeping the premiums the same, but we are increasing the spending or the liabilities from the fund that's determined by the premium. So if it were actuarially sound before this amendment, it wasn't to start with, but I'm just going to say, we're just making the fund more unactuarially sound, which will result in higher costs and premiums.
Any additional discussion on the A79? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. The A79 is adopted. Any additional discussions or amendments on House File 2 as amended? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to offer the A85 amendment.
Senator Pratt offers the A85 amendment. You should all have it also in your packet. Senator Pratt, to your A85 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the author and Deed for working with me on this. Members, you'll notice on the last section of your bill, it talks about an actuarial study. Senator Nelson's referred to it several times tonight. And Mr. Chair, because this is such a unique product, I think we have to make sure that we have set aside some and assure that we've got an actuary that has some experience in dealing with this. And so it talks about the fact that the consultant is one who is a fellow of the Society of Actuaries, member of the American Academy of Actuaries, and who has experience directly relevant to the analysis that is being required. It also, and I appreciate the department's recommendation that if the actuarial study comes back and the program is unsound, it requires the commissioner to come back to the legislature with a plan on how to make the program sound. I appreciate Senator Mann indicating she's willing to accept this as a friendly amendment, and I'll leave it to any. I'll take any questions.
All right. Any questions? Senator Mann, to the A85 amendment.
Thank you, Senator Pratt, for working with me on this in advance. I appreciate that very much. And I completely agree with you. We need to make sure that this program is going to be successful, and so we accept the A85. Mr. Chair.
Senator Nelson, to the A85.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. To the A85, I support this, but my question then is, when we have an actuarial study on something that we've already passed the benefits into law for, where does the discrepancy come from? There's only one place which can be increasing those premiums. There is no other avenue. So I would say that the actuarial study is absolutely critical. But to my earlier point, we'll vote on this amendment. This is out of order because you can't determine the actual premiums until you have that actuarial study, Mr. Chair.
Senator Nelson, as I look at lines 1.5 and lines 1.6, it clearly states that the commissioner must present options to the legislature to adjust the program to make the program actuarially sound. So it looks to me as if they are doing the things that one might need to do. But I'm going to go to Senator Mann, and perhaps she can shed some additional light on this as the trusted author. Senator Mann.
That is absolutely correct, Mr. Chair. And also, the language in the bill currently says that the actuarial study has to be done well in advance before the program starts. And so we will have all of our ducks in a row.
Any other questions on the A85? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The A85 is adopted. Any additional amendments on the on Senate File 2 as amended? Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair. I have the A86, which should be in your packets and should have been posted.
If you give me one moment there, Senator Draheim, I don't see it yet. All right, thank you. I have the A86. Everyone is in possession of it? Thank you so much. Senator Draheim to the A86.
And Chair, I should point out that this was drafted to the A83 amendment. So on the amendment on line 2.8, it says language was added, an individual selected by the, on 2.8, section 6, and I have change "and" to one individual selected, and then add per benefit year. That was drafted, right or not? But
This still works. Senator Draheim, do you want to amend the amendment in order to make it work?
I would love to, Chair.
Or would you like Senate Council to give us some guidance?
I think the Senate Council would be better
Well,
at it.
Mr. Chair and Senator Draheim, so you want to amend the new, the family member definition, and incapacitated person was just added. So if you want to limit the amount of family members or the amount of people that can
Be identified.
be identified as incapacitated person, then this would be the place to do it. So it's fine to amend the amendment this way.
Thank you, Chair.
All right. Senator Mann to the A86 amendment.
Mr. Chair, Senator Draheim, could you explain to me the intent behind the amendment?
Senator Draheim.
Thank you. I think it just clarifies what I think you're already trying to get at, that, when an existing company would have a benefit package, they would have you as the employee identify who would be in the category to be included for the benefit. So if someone got sick, you would identify. So if you had a significant other that you're not married to, you could identify that significant other. Or if you had a individual that was like a father or a mother to you, and you want to identify them, if something happened to them, you would want to take your leave to take care of them. So you're identifying a person and not multiple persons. Is that your intent of your amended?
And so, Senator Draheim, just so I understand what your amendment is saying, it is suggesting that when someone gets hired or at some time throughout the year, whenever people renew their benefits, you're saying that you want that person identified ahead of time before they may need to use that benefit for that person. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, Chair.
Senator Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the way I read the amendment to the amendment, it would significantly reduce the care that a person may need. So for example, if you are given 3 months to live and you say I'm terminal, I have 3 months, and I choose my brother to take care of me, he can take care of me for 12 weeks only, and no one else can take care of me at the same time. That's the original amendment. Now, this amendment says that after 12 weeks lapses, no one else can come take care of me. So I'm going to die alone in my house without anybody else being able to take leave to come take care of me.
But don't you already have your brother identified? I'm sorry, Chair.
Senator Drahan, will you speak through the chair, please?
Apologize, Chair.
Senator Drahan, you want
Thank
to follow up?
Senator Mann, don't you already have your brother identified as a family member? So
Mr.
in that
Chair.
example, that wouldn't be the case.
But Senator Drahan, what happens in your amendment if you don't have your brother identified and then your brother later is identified as terminal and you didn't identify the person? Then would you be able to utilize your benefits for that person that you did not identify ahead of time? Senator Drahan.
Thank you, Chair Champion and Senator Mann. I think my amendment obviously needs a little work. And I apologize for that. I saw it late, right before I got here. My intent was the non-identified people that you have in your bill, where before you had infinity, and pretty much anybody, one of my college roommates from 35 years ago, I could claim. And what I'm trying to do is take that portion of your language and make sure that people are identifying who it is on an annual basis.
Senator Mann, I mean, I have a thought, but it's your bill. Senator Mann.
Mr. Chair, so again, the way I read this language, the amendment to the amendment, I can identify that one person, and that one person can come take care of me for 12 weeks because that's the amount of leave that they are allowed under the bill. And if I need more leave than, more care than 12 weeks, no one else can come take care of me because I identified that one person. And so my family cannot take turns coming to take care of me. And for those reasons, I do not want to accept this amendment, Senator.
Senator Pratt, to the A86 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would Senator Draheim yield for a question?
Senator Draheim, will you yield? He will yield, but we don't have to ask if you yield. You can just ask him a question, then we go from there. Although you are making me feel like I'm in a familiar place, let me just say.
It's all about making you feel comfortable, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Senator Pratt.
Senator Draheim, I'm just kind of curious because I want a little clarification because it sounds like maybe you and Senator Mann are talking about this in two separate ways, and I want to understand your content. Senator Mann is reading this as the person who is incapacitated may choose one person. What I think you were trying to get at is that a claimant for a paid family medical leave benefit was able to claim one unrelated person. Was that your intent? It's more on the claimant versus on the incapacitated person. Am I understanding that correctly?
Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Senator Pratt and Chair Champion. Yes, so if you look at the subdivision where this language sits on page 11 of the main bill, it talks about family member. So you have the typical children, parents, siblings, like your example of a brother, grandparents, and then under 6, you had deleted that and inserted an individual selected by the incapacitated person. And all I'm trying to do is limit the scope of how many people that is by inserting one instead of an. And then I am putting per benefit year, like a lot of health programs have, that you have to, a period to renew, et cetera. I think that's a reasonable amendment, and it clarifies. And if you take it a step farther, if you're a big corporation or a small-sized corporation, and you have existing benefits already, and you're trying to match your program here, I think it'd be very difficult for an existing entity that already has benefits that exceed what you're trying to put in here to have that broad of a definition, especially if they have to go get bonds and some of the other language that has been inserted into this bill. So that's where I'm at. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Mann.
Mr. Chair, so again, but the way that the language is worded, I would choose one person, and only one person could take care of me an entire year. And because they are only offered 12 weeks leave, I'm going to be left without care. The way that the bill is drafted currently, as the incapacitated person, I can choose, I can be someone's family member or someone's choice. That's already in there. It's just one person. And only one person can be that person at a time. So I'm not sure if you're intending, that's already in there. But the way that this is worded, this would leave people without care because only one person would be able to do it for the whole year.
So if I might, here's what I think I hear Senator Draheim saying, and I still say that I don't agree, but I think what I hear Senator Draheim saying is that if I, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in this scenario, if I'm going to work for X company and I'm there, I work for them, and I have this benefit of paid family leave. What I think I hear Senator Draheim saying is I, Bobby Joe Champion, have to identify who I want to potentially use my benefit on by saying it's going to be just for today's purposes, Zainab Muhammad. And let's say I put her down as my person. But let's say, God forbid, and we would love it, but Zainab does not need that benefit. Let's say now I need it for my good friend, Tom. Because I restricted myself based on your amendment to Senator Muhammad, if I wanted to use it for my good friend, Tom, I'm not able to do that because Tom is not the person identified on my benefit. Do I have the scenario right first, Senator Draheim?
Yes, you do.
So to me, that is problematic because I don't have the foresight, even though I'm good at so many things. I do not have a telescope. I don't have a telepathic opportunity by which to know who might need this benefit. It could.
So, Chair, Chair, and I have to leave here shortly. I would like to withdraw my amendment and continue to work on it.
Yeah.
To add some more clarifying language with the author, if that's okay.
The A6 amendment, the A86 amendment has been withdrawn. Any additional amendments for? I think Senator Housley has a question. Senator
Nope,
Housley?
it was to that amendment that's been withdrawn. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Housley. Any additional amendments for Senate File 2 as amended? Senator Draheim.
I have one more, Chair, if I could. A87.
Senator Draheim offers the A87 amendment. Everyone has it? All right, Senator Draheim, please walk us through the A87 amendment.
Thank you. On page 52, line 15, delete beginning, and then on line 21, delete for grants to community-based groups and insert to educate employers on compliance with this chapter in fiscal year 26-27. The commissioner may use 25% of the projected benefit payments for the purpose of this section in fiscal year 2028 and beyond. The percentage allocated for this purpose goes down to 0. And I guess my train of thought on this, Chair, is that this is a very complicated program. And there is going to have to be some communication and outreach to businesses to make sure they're complying. And that is the whole goal. And I think this is the right approach for a short time. I think we are going to have to have people reaching out to different trade associations and different mom and pop businesses all over the state. This would fund that. And then after this period, You know, if there is a need to have community-based groups go out and educate the employees, that could be done at a later time. But I think first we have to get businesses up to speed to make sure they're following the law, and then tend to the program. The program doesn't work if it's not being used properly. So this is my idea, and I appreciate the time.
All right, any other questions? Well, let me go to Senator Mann. Senator Mann to the A87 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Senator Draheim, I love your idea, and I love the intent behind this amendment. And so a couple of things. First, that is why on line 52.17, outreach, education, technical assistance to employees and employers, it's already included in there. I don't like the idea of removing grants to the community-based groups because part of that job would also be to teach employers appropriate paperwork. And we know that when information is disseminated by people with ties to the community, that information goes further and is delivered better. And lastly, I don't like the idea of cutting the funding for this particular part of the program because this is an equity issue. So, for example, when the program was first introduced in California, there was a disproportionate leave-taking between high-income and low-income earners and between white and BIPOC communities. And it was until they did a public outreach that that leave-taking equalized. So this piece is very important for equity reasons. I don't want to cut the funding to it. But if we want to add more language about the employer education piece, which again is already in there, but I would be happy to do that. But today I request a no on this amendment, please.
All right, any additional discussion to the A87 amendment? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support Senator Draheim's amendment. I think the idea here is to make sure that employers are helping their employees utilize the benefit. And I share Senator Draheim's concern that we are reserving half of the funding to community-based groups. And I think that's way too much. Now, if you know, DEED wants to work with NDC's partners, and then they can make that decision. But to absolutely reserve half of that, and then I think we should be stepping down the amount that we're putting into this marketing, because it's going to become a part of our normal business interest, just as we do not market long-term unemployment insurance.
Any, Senator Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I agree with that. And I think that what we can do going forward is see what leave taking is looking like between, again, low and high wage earners. And then once that is equalized, we can go ahead and sunset the program.
Any additional questions on the A87 amendment? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may have misheard, but I thought the author said the amendment was 25%. It's 1/4%, correct? Just to correct the record, or I might have misheard as well. But is it 1/4%?
Senator Draheim to the question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, 1/4%. Thank you, Senator Nelson.
Any additional questions on the A87 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. The amendment doesn't prevail. I don't think it prevails. Is there anything that you want to say? I can tell by the look on your face, Senator Pratt.
Mr. Chair, I request a division.
I knew that you were going to do that. How did I know that? Where is her?
He's in the back. Grab him.
Hold on one moment. Okay, here we go. Thank you. All those in favor, wave your hand. Raise your hand. Those in favor. Let's see. You gonna count? You got to count. I can't be the one counting. All those opposed, raise your hand. There is 4 in favor and 5 against. The amendment is not adopted.
I must have been mistaken, Mr. Chair. I thought the voice count was different. Mr. Chair, would Ms. Grunwald-Noldner be able to answer a question for me?
Say it one more time.
Would Ms. Grunwald-Noldner be able to answer a question?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Grunwald-Noldner, we have the fiscal note in front of us. Can you tell us at what version of the bill the fiscal note was drafted to?
Ms. Noder.
Mr. Chair and members, the fiscal note in your packets is noted to the version of the bill that was passed out of the Jobs Committee. So the 1A amendment is what the fiscal note is reflecting.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we're working on the sixth engrossment of this bill. We've got now additional pieces that we've added to it. As Senator Nelson has said, we've added a significant amount of cost potentially as it's gone through the various stages. It seems to me that this fiscal note is, quite honestly, by the time we got it yesterday, it's already out of date. And so, Mr. Chair, I would move that we lay this bill on the table until we can get an updated fiscal note. I would request a roll call on the motion, and I would request that the results of the roll be printed in the journal.
There has to be at least 3 hands. I see 3 hands. And this motion is non-debatable. Here we go. Ready? Let's do it.
Chair Champion,
No.
Vice Chair Mohammed,
No.
Ranking Member Draheim,
Yes.
Senator Gustafson,
No.
Senator Hur,
No.
Senator Housley,
Yes.
Senator Pratt,
Yes.
Senator Putnam,
No.
Senator Nelson,
Yes.
There being 4 yeses and 5 noes, the motion does not prevail. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would Ms. Grunwald-Noldner answer a question for me on the fiscal note, please?
She sure will. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Grunwald-Noldner, I saw that the University of Minnesota provided a cost for this. Am I reading that correctly?
Ms. Noldner.
Mr. Chair and members, yes, Senator Pratt, you're reading that correctly.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, may I ask counsel a question?
You sure can. Ms. Carlin Fontaine, Dole Fontaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Doyle-Fontaine, I was looking at the route for this bill. Can you tell me, did I miss something? Was this bill ever heard in higher ed to talk about the cost of the University of Minnesota?
Ms. Dole Fontaine.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, no, it was not heard in higher education, as far as I know.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the bill be referred out of committee to the Committee on Higher Education without recommendation.
All right. To that motion, any thoughts, Senator Mann?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the bill has been heard now in 8 committees. It went through a thorough process of who had jurisdiction over what, and at no point in time was it ever recommended for it to go to higher education.
Senator Pratt, and then Senator Nelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would agree with Senator Mann that from the policy side, there was probably no reason for it to go to higher education, but the University of Minnesota provided us a fiscal note. Higher ed is a finance committee and should have jurisdiction now over the expenses that the university, the $18.9 million in the second biennium and the $1.3 million in the first biennium that have been identified in the fiscal note.
So is that a question or is, okay, got it. Senator, sorry about that, Senator Pratt. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add to that, I support Senator Pratt's motion, it's really, and I understand the frustration of taking bills through many committees, but that's how bills get refined, is they go to the committee that has jurisdiction or the most input on a particular part of a bill. And that's why we have this bill in front of us today. But, the fact of the matter is that there is a fiscal note from the University of Minnesota. This bill really does need to go to that committee. And at least, and if the chair doesn't want to give it a hearing or whatever, that's totally up to them. But I can't imagine that, but they should definitely be in front of higher ed. So the U of M has the opportunity to weigh in on this or make comments, or the committee members have an opportunity to do so. So it just seems that maybe we're just trying to cut a little bit of a corner here. We still have plenty of time. I believe we are not out of time, Mr. Chair. We have a number of weeks left in session, and the Rules Committee can, grant this through if it needs to be. But I'm just saying it really should go to higher ed and get that. We would not want to start a tradition in the Senate of not taking bills to the committees that they impact.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the reason why the U of M is in the fiscal note is because, from my understanding, is that the state pays 17% of their wages. So the bill will not impact the U of M in any sort of way because that money comes from the general fund. Not only that, but the numbers in here are fairly inaccurate. Side note, they attributed the entire 0.7% premium instead of the 0.35%, and it doesn't. It's 100% of wages, not just the 17%.
So, Senator Nelson, so we can vote?
Yeah, well, just
on the motion?
Yeah, just a moment, Mr. Chair.
Senator
Just
Nelson.
one thing that I think is important to note, though. That is the point, Senator Mann, you did make my point, or Senator Pratt's point. The university will be paying for this particular, for the leave for its employees, and because of that, they should have a say in maybe how many professors will they not be able to have because they are paying for this paid leave. I'm just saying it should go to higher ed for the very reasons that you said as well.
I want to make sure that we are clear about something as well. A reason why I do not support the motion that is before us, only because of the fact that if you think about it, this particular piece of policy will impact other employees and other employers, and we cannot send it to everywhere and every place, but that's why we have jobs and economic development so that we can talk about its impact. And it's here, in fact, this is the second time that it's here with us, and I think that serves well. And it's my understanding, unless Senator Mann corrects me if I'm wrong, there's no policy that refers to higher ed, and that there was no request from higher ed by which to have this bill. But let me go over here because I think Senator Draheim had his hand up first. Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair and Senator Mann. Just to remind, it's been a few years since I've been at higher ed, but back then they had almost 40,000 employees between Mann State and the U of M. To say there would be no fiscal impact, I think is a huge understatement. In fact, they have as many employees as the rest of the state for state employees. So I can't think of a more important place for as far as impact on number of employees, which my dad would be in that group when he was working, that would be impacted. So I think it's a must that it goes to higher education. I would like a roll call and for it to be put in the journal.
Roll call requested, roll call granted.
Three hands.
There you go, 3 hands. All right, Senator Putnam, did you still want to say anything, or?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. You said what I was going to say, but with much more grace and clarity.
Thank you. Let's now, Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick thought here, since it's my motion. I want to thank Senator Mann for acknowledging that the fiscal note is inaccurate, which was why we made the original motion to lay this on the table. The fiscal note is inaccurate. But there is a cost to the University of Minnesota, and I believe that the Finance Committee has the right to review this before it's passed, and so I encourage a yes vote.
Okay, Senator Pratt, I just want to make sure I'm clear, because it sounds like you sort of shifted a gear there. So are you asking now to lay this bill on the table again? Or
No,
are you
Mr. Chair,
saying-
I'm saying Senator Mann made my point on the original motion that was defeated, that the fiscal note is inaccurate, but we should at least send it to the University of Minnesota, and that motion was defeated. I'm not going to rehash that motion right now. Maybe later, but not now. What I am going to say is it does have an $18, $19 million impact on the University of Minnesota, probably to Minnesota State, which is not reflected in here and should be considered. So I do believe this has to go to higher ed, and I request that members vote yes.
A roll call has been requested on the motion to pass this bill without recommendations and re-refer to higher ed. That's the motion that's before the body. We are now ready to take the roll. The chair votes no.
Vice Chair Mohammed,
No.
Ranking Member Draheim.
Rich, it says yes.
Senator Gustafson,
No.
Senator Hur,
No.
Senator Housley,
Yes.
Senator Pratt,
Yes.
Senator Putnam,
No.
Senator Nelson,
Yes.
There have been 4 yeses and 5 noes. The motion to re-refer to higher ed does not prevail. Any additional motions or amendments? Senator Nelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. If we're done with the amendments, I do have a motion.
I believe that we are done with the amendments. I want to make sure that I'm not being presumptuous. We are done with the motions, the amendments. Now to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One, I appreciate the conversation we've had today, and I appreciate the conversation, Mr. Chair, that you've let us delve into this a little bit. And my motion, Mr. Chair, is to move that we lay this on the table until we get an actuarial study. I realize that's it is the responsible thing to do, to have an, we would never, Mr. Chair, we would never, ever let an insurance company come into our state and set up an insurance plan with benefits.
Senator
And
Nelson?
so I'm going off my script. I'm thinking.
I'm sorry, but you know
Yeah.
that a motion to lay a bill on the table is non-debatable.
Okay.
I did let you talk a little bit, but it's non-debatable. Okay?
I understand, it's not debatable.
Okay, here we go. To the motion, would you like a roll call vote, or?
Yes, I would like a roll call, and I would like it in the journal, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I think I see
Senator
Senator Housley's hand there, so, okay. Roll call, requested roll call granted. The secretary will, the committee legislative assistant will take the roll, and the chair votes no.
Vice Chair Mohammed,
No.
Senator Draheim? Okay. Senator Gustafson,
No.
Senator Hur,
No.
Senator Housley,
Yes.
Senator Pratt,
Yes.
Senator Putnam,
No.
Senator Nelson,
Yes.
Senator Draheim,
There have been 3 ayes and 5 noes. The motion does not prevail. Members, any final comments before we take a vote? I see that it's going to go to Senator Pratt, and then we're going to go to Senator Nelson, if that's okay. And I think I see Senator Housley as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think we're done with amendments and motions. Just some questions on the bill and the underlying amendment. And I have my pages all mixed up here, so please excuse me. Senator Mann, I was looking at your A3 amendment, or your A83 amendment, and on line 4.22 of the amendment, you refer back to line 25, page 25, line 7, and you strike the language and add in unless the leave is intermittent. And I guess my question is, if I recall, and right below, can you help me understand the concept of the intermittent leave? And I get the 12 weeks, but at what point in time, like how short is intermittent?
Senator Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So any event, whether intermittent or not, has to have a 7-day qualifying event. And what we're saying in the language here in the amendment is that those days do need to be consecutive. So they have to be 7 in a row unless you have intermittent leave. And the reason for intermittent leave could be various. But for example, if you are diagnosed with cancer and you need chemotherapy once a week, and you need to be gone from work that Monday for chemo and the following Tuesday, perhaps even for recovery, and then you're back to work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it repeats. So that's the idea behind intermittent leave.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Mann. So under that scenario, and I was thinking of a very similar scenario, would those 2 days count as a benefit week? Because I don't see anywhere in the legislation where we're counting benefit days.
Senator Mann.
Yeah, so if you refer back to the minimum amount of benefit, it's a benefit day, so those would count as 2 days in that scenario. So yeah.
Senator Mann.
Yes. Let me take a minute to find it.
I read through the bill and I didn't.
Senator Pratt, please speak through the chair.
Page 23.
Senator Mann, could you repeat the page? Did you say page 23?
Yes, I'm trying to
If you speak
find
right in
it
the mic,
here.
that'd be great.
Page 23, 2312, minimum period for which benefits payable.
Senator Pratt, do you have a follow-up? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I read that, minimum period for which a benefit is payable, it must be based on a single qualifying event, I get that, of at least 7 calendar days. Benefits may be paid for a minimum duration of 8 consecutive hours in a week. And if an applicant on leave claims 8 hours at any point during the week, the minimum duration is satisfied, but that does not tell me whether or not by taking those 8 or 16 hours, I have burned out one of my 12 weeks of leave.
Senator Mann.
Mr. Chair, so we did amend that language. It's 4.15 in the amendment. And so we're saying that based on a single qualifying event, minimum duration to receive benefits is 1 workday in a work week. So if you take 1 day, that's 1 day.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But Senator Mann, the benefit is a weekly benefit, not a daily benefit. Even in your amendment, where we reduced the benefit from 24 to 20 weeks, we're very clear that we're not talking about number of days, we're talking about number of weeks. And if I use a 1 or 2 work days within a week, doesn't that then trigger that as a week, even though I may only take, you're right, I don't have to take 5 consecutive days. I can take 1 day, but it as the legislation is written, it to me seems to indicate that it uses up 1 week of benefit.
Senator Mann.
Mr. Chair, Senator, so under the intermittent leave piece of the bill, it says that the time is prorated when leave is intermittent.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Senator Mann, a typical work week is 5 days. If I take 2 days a week, then I'm using 1 week of benefit over 3 weeks. So I'm effectively using a benefit over 36 weeks for a 12-week benefit?
Senator Mann.
Mr. Chair, yeah, so that's why it's intermittent, right? Because if you take one day and you're working the rest of the 4 days, we're not going to give you a week's worth of benefit. We're going to give you a day.
Senator Pratt, if you want to think a little more, I can go on to the next person.
I'll let it go, Mr. Chair, but I'll say I think it's very confusing because the whole discussion has been around a number of weeks of benefits, and as we look at this now, we're actually extending the benefits. And then when you add in the family leave portion of it, you've got someone taking a benefit during the entire year. And I think even as I read through the bill, I wasn't reading what Senator Mann was reading into it. So I find it very confusing, and I'm concerned at how this intermittent benefit will not only be understood by employees, but also employers.
Senator Nelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Mann, I'm glad you addressed this problem. It is an issue. But I am concerned about the good intentions, but the good intentions leading to how it's actually not going to achieve the goals that you seek. And the concern is this, Mr. Chair. We talked a lot here today about trying to understand this kind of one-size-fits-all and how that's going to affect all these different cases about if your brother is able to be your guardian or be able to be your person to care for. There's just so many individual things that this is like a one-size-fits-all, and there's just nothing one-size-fits-all about Minnesota employees, about their medical needs, their family needs, and that's what we're trying to shoehorn into this bill here, is a one-size-fits-all. And I'll just give you a couple examples where I think it's really going to hurt Minnesotans because it's such a mandate. And let's look at some of our companies that they're providing what actually their employees want. They design their paid family leave, their sick leave policies for what the employees need. And particularly at this time when we have such a shortage of workers can design and demand really what they need or what they want. And so companies here, right here in Minnesota, many of them already provide 8 weeks of leave at 100%. And yet, they would be out of compliance with this bill because they do 100% for 8 weeks, which is what their employees want when the need is. But this bill says, oh, no, you will be out of compliance because you're not offering 12 weeks. So that's just one example where the employers are already doing what is needed. And I would just say the biggest concern is that it's going to hurt people, well-intended, but it's going to take away the type of leave that employees have now that fits their needs. And it's going to replace it with a one-size-government-fits-all solution. And it's an expensive solution, members. It looks like, if I'm looking at the 64-page fiscal note here, once the program's up and running, it's about a $1.3 billion cost, not necessarily to the state, but to the employers. And we know, and the employees may have to pay part of that as well. And we know that when employers don't have enough money to pay the mandated bills like this, or taxes, or business operating expenses, what do they have to do? They have one place to go, which is to reduce staff. And in fact, members, I handed out to you sheets from several of the superintendents in my schools. You will see that in the Triton Public Schools, a small school in Dodge Center, the superintendent wrote about his concerns about what this payroll tax will do. And he said they'll be forced to reduce staff or cut back on other programs to afford this. I know that's not the intent of this bill, but that's what's happening here, folks. We also have, I passed out to you letters from the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce. And again, they talked about the problems with the bill. And you can look at the list of employers, job providers that are concerned about how this is going to affect them. And you have the Byron School. I handed this sheet out to you as well, members. And this is going to cost $57,000 at the Byron Public School, small public school. In fact, it's one of the lowest schools in our district of receiving funds. It's like on the second or third of the lowest schools receiving funds. Let me just say, they have excellent outcomes. They have phenomenal outcomes, blue ribbon schools. But the fact of the matter is, $57,000, $57,716.92. This is going to cost the Byron Public Schools. How many? That'd be a teacher. Could be a couple paraprofessionals. I'm just saying, I think it's wrong. It's just, we're missing the mark here, folks. Then I have another sheet from the Cass and Manorville schools. And that one, depending on, he has it divided out two ways depending on how it comes out. It's either $69,990 or $1,039,980 to our schools. This is an added cost. Our counties, I passed out a letter to you also, I think, from our counties. Oh, you have it in your packet already, members. The counties believe that this will impact property taxes because the League of Minnesota Cities, the Association of Minnesota Counties, have computed this. So doing this is going to cause them to increase property taxes. And then let's talk about the costs to the state budget. The state budget, I believe, Senator Mann, is about over $600 million to front load this program. That's money that could be going to our schools to get more school counselors, or it could, so I'm just saying there's so many other things we could be doing. And then, of course, you have the list from United for Jobs. This is such a long list of job providers in our state who are concerned. It's such small print, I could hardly read it all, but it's from all over the state. And so I applaud the initiative, the idea, but it's just not developed well here, and it is going to hurt people. And furthermore, we don't have the actuarial data to build this massive government program on. So I appreciate the discussion tonight, but I remain unconvinced, as do many Minnesotans.
Before we let Senator Mann react to that, I want to just make sure that we know that I know Senator Nelson wanted to make sure that there are certain letters that was passed out, and I just want to acknowledge on the record that that information has been cited and provided.
Thank you.
There are also letters of support that are also a part of your packet, because one of the things we wanted to make sure that we are certain of, that even though on the website for a brief time it said support letters, that we want the public to know that we have accepted both support letters and those who are in opposition to Senate File 2. With that, we'll go now to Senator Mann, if you want to react to any of the things that you heard from Senator Nelson, before we go to Senator Housley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Nelson. So first, I'd like to say that the premium on this program is 0.35% for an employer and an employee, which for the average Minnesota worker is about a cup of coffee per week. Second, while you're absolutely correct that some employers are designing leave that cater to their employees, the vast majority are not. 24% of people have access to paid leave in Minnesota. So to say that they're already doing this is just incorrect. Next, we made opting out as easy as possible, especially with today's amendment, and people can opt out. Any employer can opt out, and they can make their own plan. And now we talk about consistently, in every committee, we talk about the cost to businesses. And as usual, we have zero conversation about anything else, right? So we don't talk about the decreased cost in childcare because we know that infant care is essentially subsidized by toddler care. We don't talk about the increased cost in long-term care. In some states, the decreased utilization of long-term care by 11% after this program passes. We do not talk about the decreased cost to businesses due to not needing to train new employees because of increased employee retention. 20% increase in employee retention in states that this has passed. We also don't talk about healthcare costs, right? The millions of dollars saved in clinic visits and hospitalization, $20 million saved in premature births. And so I understand the concern to business, but the costs that we're saving across every other sector in our society, we should be talking more about those.
So Senator Nelson, I'm going to go back to you, but I wanted to go to Senator Housley afterwards, but I want to make sure I give you a chance to make your case. So that we can go on. If you'll be brief, that would be
I
great.
will be very brief because
Senator
I
Nelson.
think we've had a good discussion here tonight. I just want to say a couple things. Senator Mann, you're interested in dynamic scoring. Many of us have been interested in that for a long period of time, but we don't have dynamic scoring now, but you may have made a case for that. But let's just talk briefly about other states. Other states, if we were to look at other states, their assumptions were wrong, and those payroll taxes went up. They didn't go down. In fact, I think your fiscal note, the payroll taxes went up 2 or 3 times, as I believe, as the note was coming forward. So we have to be careful of that. But the most important thing I would leave with is there is a better way. And the better way is providing a carrot instead of a stick, a tax credit to employers who offer do the right thing and offer paid family leave, because if they don't, there's a reason. It's not economical. They can't do it. They can't stay in business. And then secondly, some employees would still be stuck without an employer who does not offer it and not having this state program. So then there is a refundable tax credit to that employee who would be able to get refundable tax credits, meaning if they don't pay taxes, they still would get those funds. And then lastly, we pair it with a rather new product on the market that some states have allowed, but Minnesota has not. And one of the biggest drivers, of course, is maternity. And there is now a disability policy for maternity and encouraging employers to purchase that. So I'm just saying there is a better way, more sound way to get to where we want to go. That is my conclusion, Mr. Chair.
Senator Housley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Mann, for bringing the topic and the issue to us. I understand your intent because I think almost everyone on this committee has had to take time away from our jobs to take care of a family member, whether it's an accident or an illness or during hospice care. It's hard, and it's hard juggling it all. But like Senator Nelson said, I do think there is a better way and a better solution. And I'm pretty worried that we've had testimony from every major employer group that says their member companies, which offer oftentimes better plans, don't think they're going to be able to qualify for the opt-out provisions. So a lot of Minnesotans are going to lose their plans. And also, Senator Nelson talked about it. This has a major impact on our schools and our cities and counties, like large fiscal impacts that are not well understood because we don't have the local impact notes or a qualified actuarial study. I was even going to make a motion to refer this to education finance or re-refer it to state and local government and veterans, but I know how that's going to turn out. So I just wanted to go on record to say that I'm really, really concerned that that's what's going to happen to all of these local units of government. Will be forced to raise property taxes significantly to comply with this mandate, even when many of them already offer a good benefit for their workers. So I don't understand the rush, Mr. Chair. I wish we could keep it here in this committee, lay it over, and continue to work on it. But I don't think that's going to be the case. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Housley. Senator Pratt, you'll be the last one before we go to Senator Mann. Is that okay?
I wasn't expecting closing comments, actually.
Oh, you have something else?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if somebody could walk us through the fiscal note.
All right.
Since that's what we're here for.
So we would certainly do that, but that's a little different from the process that we had laid out that we were going to do. But that's okay. Let's make
Mr.
sure
Chair,
that you have every
if there's
opportunity.
if there's a walkthrough of the fiscal note somewhere in the process, I'm willing to wait.
Nope, we would do it right now. So Ms. Noner, will you be so kind as to go through the fiscal note? Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair and members, I'll be walking through the fiscal note provided in your packet, and I think it's easiest to look at page 3. It just shows all of the costs and the net costs on one page. And like what was stated before, this fiscal note is on the version of the bill that was passed out of the Jobs Committee, so the 1A amendment. And there has been an updated fiscal note requested on the A83 language. And once the bill has been engrossed to the 7th version, I think with the additional amendments adopted today, we can update that fiscal note amendment, or fiscal note request to make sure that everything that's adopted in committee today can be fiscal noted. So what I'll do is walk through kind of the higher level costs of each agency, and then maybe at the end, if members have questions, we can dig into some more details if needed. So beginning, I'm going to be just looking at the costs to the agencies in this first table on page 3. This is showing the net for agencies, including the expenditures and the revenues, which are the tables following this table. But I'll begin with administrative hearings at the top of the table on page 3. So administrative hearings has a net 0 cost. They do have expenditures that will be charged to the Department of Labor and to DEED. For the Department of Labor, administrative law judge time will be charged to them, and then for DEED, rulemaking will be charged to them. For the Commerce Department, these costs of $376,000 in fiscal year '24, $316,000 in fiscal year '25, and $128,000 every year thereafter ongoing. These costs reflect the FTEs needed for private plan product review. And my understanding is, as the bill sits in front of us now, these costs would be shared between the general fund and the paid family leave fund. So right now, the fiscal note is showing just the general fund, but as amended, the bill in front of us would have the costs in fiscal year 2025 through 2027 shown in the paid family medical leave account. So then the Department of Employment and Economic Development, the $1.7 billion you see from the general fund is the appropriation within the bill, and that is transferred then into the paid family medical leave account. And the line for paid family leave shows a cumulative total of a few different things. So this includes the benefits paid calculation from a model that DEED utilized to calculate the benefits paid from the model's called Worker Plus. This total also includes admin, IT, the business subsidy program, and then the revenue that's being reflected in this net total is from employer premiums, which that revenue is starting to show in fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027. Then on Human Services Department, the amounts shown here are all general fund expenditures, and this is showing the impact on nursing home reimbursements and also the Department of Human Services IT system update. Then for the Department of Labor and Industry, here the amounts are split between general fund and paid family medical leave. So the general fund amounts showing up in fiscal year 2024, $601,000, and then the ongoing amounts would then shift to paid family medical leave once the program is enacted. And these amounts include the investigation FTE costs, IT costs, the Office of Administrative Hearings legal fees, outreach, and IT user license costs. And then the revenue that is shown in this agency is coming from penalty fees, which are mostly going back to the complainant and not the general fund. So then next, the legislature is listed here as an employer, and the costs are showing the employer premiums as well as the IT costs. MMB is listed also as an employer, and they're covering all state agencies except for the legislature and the University of Minnesota. So that's why those two are listed out separately. And Minnesota Management and Budget is split between the general fund and all other funds. This is because not all state agencies are going to have their paychecks coming from the general fund. So that split is 34% and 65% of the total, split between the general fund and all other funds respectively. And all these amounts include the premiums paid, IT costs, other costs like notices, backfill costs, cost savings of benefits paid by the employer. And that is all that MMB includes there.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just because the public doesn't have this sheet, so I think it's important that you read those numbers, or you probably will when you get to a spot, so the public is aware. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Ms. Nona.
Mr. Chair and members, Senator Nelson, thank you for that. I can pick off where I left off, or would you like me to go back and read the amounts that?
Just pick up where you left off.
Okay.
Senator Nelson.
I do think it's important to know the cost to the taxpayer, really, with the Minnesota Management and Budget piece. So maybe just those last couple lines that I have some pretty big numbers that are taxpayer numbers I think would be good to read.
Mr. Chair and members, for Minnesota Management and Budget, the general fund expenditure cost in fiscal year 2025 is $118,000, and in fiscal year 2026 is $5.798 million, and that's the ongoing amount in the next year there and years thereafter. And then in all other funds under MMB, the expenditures for fiscal year 2025 are $143,000, and then beginning in fiscal year 2026 and beyond each year, it's $11 million. So then for the Secretary of State, the costs here are coming from the general fund, $384,000 in fiscal year 2024, $4,000 in fiscal year 2025, and then $76,000 beginning in fiscal year 2026 and each year thereafter. And those amounts are including IT cost, appeals, collections, premium collection, and the IT costs are specifically for adding new lien to the lien filing system. For the Supreme Court, the general fund costs here are $15,000 in fiscal year 2024, $15,000 in 2025, and then a savings of $42,000 in fiscal year 2026, and in fiscal year 2027, a $327,000 expenditure ongoing. And those amounts include IT costs, training staff, and filing fee revenue, which is showing up in that savings line in fiscal year 2026. And the training and IT costs would be for appeals and civil action against determinations and against employers. And then for the University of Minnesota, they are listed as an employer, and their amounts beginning in fiscal year 2025, $1.37 million in fiscal year 2025, and then in fiscal year 2026, $9.46 million, and then that amount is ongoing each year thereafter. And the University of Minnesota costs include employer premiums paid, temporary employee cost, backfill cost, admin and IT upgrades, and a reduction in leave costs paid by the employer is also included in this amount. And as Senator Mann stated earlier, these amounts to the University of Minnesota are showing the entire cost to the University of Minnesota, as well as representing 100% employer share. So the net total with all the...
Ms. Norman, Senator Pratt has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have a question regarding this section for Ms. Grunwald-Noldner. It sounds like we've got some inconsistent submissions. In some cases, the submission includes the employer premium to be paid. In other cases, it does not, which leads me to my concern that we don't have the Department of Education, who has a number of employees where premium will start being paid. We don't have the state auditor. We don't have the Department of Administration. We don't have, I mean, we can list a number of different agencies that aren't reflected in here. I mean, certainly we've talked about the legislative premium, the university premium. We don't have MnState and what the impact to MnState's premium would be. Is that a fair understanding of what we've gone through so far?
Ms. Noner.
Mr. Chair and Senator Pratt, the additional agencies that you were listing off would show up in the MMB fiscal note. So they're covering all of the state agencies besides the legislature and the University of Minnesota.
Thank you.
Ms. Noner, you can continue. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and members, so picking off where I left off, we've gone through all of the agency costs, so all of those taken into consideration. The net total expenditure for this bill in fiscal year 2024 is $54.96 million. In fiscal year 2025, $73.7 million. In fiscal year 2026, there's a savings of $183.49 million. And in fiscal year 2027, there's a savings of $199 million. And if there's any other questions about the details of each section, we can certainly go into that.
Senator Nelson seemed to have a question.
Just
Senator Nelson.
briefly, and what is it that makes up for why is there savings or some, in those out years? Just if you could
Ms.
briefly
Noner.
explain that.
Ms. Noner.
Mr. Chair and members and Senator Nelson, the savings in fiscal year 2026 and 2027 can be seen on the next page. If you flip over to page 4, the revenues listed under the table titled Revenues Transfers In. This is showing all of the money coming into both the general fund and the paid family medical leave. The main one being the collections on paid family medical leave account under deed, beginning in fiscal year 2026, $1.4 billion a year coming into that account.
You may continue, Ms. Noner, if there's anything else, or have you?
Mr. Chair and members, that completes my, I guess, brief overview from a
Yep.
high level. So if there's any questions about details, I'm happy to take those.
All right, any additional questions on the fiscal note? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, you'd mentioned we had deed here. I was wondering if, are we going to go through any more of it, or we?
No, she felt like she did everything
Okay,
so
thank
that you
you,
know
Mr. Chair.
exactly how these things are moving. Senator Pratt.
I see Mr. Rowe in the audience. Would he be open to some questions?
He's approaching the testifier's table. Welcome to the committee. State your name for the record.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
what organization you're with, and then Senator Pratt has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Evan Rowe. I'm Deputy Commissioner for Workforce Services and Operations at the Department of Employment and Economic Development.
Senator Pratt, your question?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, were you being optimistic to say a question?
That's true. Questions, let me just say. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rowe, I noticed that, and I'm going to start off kind of simple, the bill has an opt-out provision, but you have made the assumption that no one will become self-insured. Can you explain how you came to that assumption and how that impacts the fiscal note that we're seeing? And do you really expect people to be self-insured?
Mr. Rowe, to the question.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, so what I would say is we use that as a way to get to a conservative financial projection, in the sense that we don't, when we are putting together the fiscal note, we don't want the possible level of benefits to be higher than, or the possible level of benefits to be higher than what would otherwise be the case. We don't have good data on what percentage of employers would necessarily opt out. Different states have seen different levels of opt-out. So the fiscally prudent approach, kind of in our view and confirmed by the LBO, is that it is safer to not assume an opt-out, and then and that's kind of how you get to the overarching projections. Now, naturally, if you had opt-outs, you'd see a decline in tax receipts, but you would also see a decline in benefits. So it would be rough. I don't want to say it would be exactly commensurate, but there would be something comparable there. So that's kind of how we get to that. That's how we got to that decision in terms of providing the modeling for the fiscal note.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rowe, I'm looking at page 10 of the fiscal note. And maybe I should go back to page 9. At the top of page 9, you have an assumption of how many employees per 1,000 would make a claim. Am I reading that little chart, own health, maternity, bonding, and family care? Am I reading that right? That's 23.7 employees per 1,000?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, that's correct.
Thank you.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rowe, then I go to page 10 and I see an assumption of 1.16 billion in expected benefits in 2026 and 1.217 billion in fiscal 2027. And my question is, what I'm missing here is what we're using in order to derive, what are the other, I see the number of claims per 1,000. What I'm not seeing is the rest of the math. Can you help me understand how we got to those totals?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I guess I'd direct you to page 8 of the fiscal note. Bottom of the.
I'm sorry, which page?
Page 8 of the fiscal note.
Thank you.
Which walks through the specifically under the major heading assumptions, subheading modeling approach, and the discussion of key variables. The modeling approach is listed there and kind of goes through the usage of the Worker Plus model, which committee staff previously mentioned.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. And I guess what I was missing is what do we expect the average claim to be, and what do we expect the average duration of a claim to be?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, it depends. So the model that we used for this provides outputs in a kind of a variety of ways. What I would say is each type of claim we would expect to have a different duration overall, and we also assume a kind of a set benefit tied to the state's average weekly wage in the calculations that are provided in the bill. It's off the top of my head, and I can get you the exact number in a sec if I can if I can just take a quick look. I think it's about, I think we assume about an average weekly claim of around $850, which ties to the math in the overall revenue formula. Again, the average duration of claim depends on the type of leave, but it varies. I think some types of leave are anticipated to be longer. For example, I want to say that certain types of medical leave or own health leave tends to be longer in duration than, say, qualifying exigency leave, which is around the deployment of a military member. Those tend to be shorter.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mr. Rowe, I've been working with some folks, and we did a little modeling ourselves, and we looked at Washington and Massachusetts, where we've seen a 9.5-week average claim and a 12-week average claim. And based on the income, let's say the average weekly benefit is $876 a week. If the average claim were 9.5 weeks, our total premium of $1.45 billion would be short $315 million based on the benefits that we've defined and the premium that we're collecting. If we were to assume that were even a little bit higher, let's say at 966 per weekly benefit, we would expect that shortfall to be closer to $500 million. And in the worst-case scenario, if we had the higher weekly benefit and a 12-week average, we would be almost $1 billion short of in the reserve fund. And so I'm kind of questioning, I mean, so I'm presuming that your modeling has average benefit, average leave, you know, all the things that you mentioned. Help me understand why, you know, when I can look at what some of the averages are in other states, I'm coming up short in what we're going to have reserved.
Mr. Rowe.
Senator Champion, Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt. Having looked at the data from a lot of other states and not having seen what the numbers that you're referencing, which I'd be very happy to take a look at and discuss, you know, I think there are a few kind of big picture items which make some of the data from other states seem higher than it actually is in practice. One is that not every claimant is claiming for every single week due to elements like intermittent leave. Another is that that can be a significant factor that brings down the overall values there. Another element is really just that each state's program is very different in terms of the construction and the various variables there. And I think and the way that they report out on these definitions can be very specific to the individual state. So I guess in terms of making some of those overall assumptions, I think you just kind of want to make sure you get into the nitty gritty to make sure that the assumptions are valid.
Mr. Rowe and Senator Pratt, you want to continue this line of questions?
I'll have some additional questions.
Because it's
please.
my understanding that you're also on finance.
Yes, sir.
And by that time, there should be the modified or updated fiscal note. And then I think it would be appropriate to sort of talk about it based on all the information that's there. But it's up to you if you want to stay
thank
here.
you, Mr. Chair. And
I'm willing to stay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. But it does go to the fact that, Senator Nelson has raised some very good points around the actuarial study, and it seems like the modeling that DEED has done does not, for lack of a better term, pass muster from an actuarial standpoint. And since this is the jurisdiction, since this is the Finance Committee of Jurisdiction, while we will get an additional fiscal note, my original motion to lay it on the table was this is the jurisdiction that should be having a valid fiscal, an accurate fiscal note, but ahead of time. And I understand that this is going to be pushed through, and I think inappropriately so. But I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I wanted to make sure I give you an opportunity. So, Senator Pratt, I'm on finance too. And I just want us to be on notice that if we're going to go down this line of questioning, which we should always question, but I think you have additional information, is it going to be prudent for us to say the same things now and then potentially say the same things in finance, the big finance committee, where it does have jurisdiction as well, because that's where the money and everything will come from. So I'm just trying to be thoughtful along with you by giving you the space in order to ask any questions you want. And I would be much more sympathetic to what you're saying, especially if this is it. There's no other place that it's going. There's no other opportunity to raise these important issues that you are raising. I'm just yielding that as an opportunity for us to have that second fiscal note. There would be also an opportunity for the LBO and others to look at what the amendments have been and how they impact the overall bill and the fiscal impact, and we have that opportunity to do it there. I'm just saying, because sometimes what happens is that we do it here, and then we just repeat ourselves and do it again in finance, and then I have the unfortunate, painful opportunity to hear it twice instead of once.
Well, Mr. Chair, I don't mean to make it painful, but Senator Gustafson's not on finance. Senator Nelson's not on finance. Senator Hur's not on finance.
But-
Senator
but-
Putnam's not on finance. So I think these are questions that this committee and its members would be interested in.
Well, let me just say, if they were interested, I think they would be asking those questions. And
Mr.
so-
Chair?
Mr. Chair, I'm okay not asking the questions about the fiscal note right now. And I just would also point out that we do this all the time, right? I mean, I know I'm new here, Senator Pratt, but we pass bills and then amend the fiscal notes as it goes on, and it seems like that's sort of common practice. So I just didn't mean to interrupt, Mr. Chair, but I would say that I think this is more appropriate for finance.
Well,
Mr. Chair?
Hold it, I want to make sure that we have control here. Okay, would you like to go before we go to Senator Housley?
no, we can go to Senator House.
Senator Housley,
Yeah, I had my hand raised, and that was the point I wanted to make exactly, is I'm not on finance, and I want to hear what financial impact this is going to have, since we're not having an actuarial study. And do we usually move bills out of committee that are more than double their target? Like, I don't think that's what we do. So I would like to see what the financial impact is. And I am listening to
all
Senator
right.
Pratt.
So Senator Pratt, why don't you hold off, if you don't mind, and let's go to Senator Housley, because that means that she has some questions that she wants to have answered around finance. Senator Housley?
Thanks. So on the fiscal note for MMB, on page 40 of the fiscal note, it says total executive and judicial branch employment headcount is not assumed to grow. Average annual growth from fiscal year 2011 through fiscal year 2022 was a negative 0.09%. How can they make that claim that the headcount won't increase?
And should we go to Ms. Nomer, or should we go to Mr. Rowe?
Mr. Chair and members, I would have to consult with the LBO and MMB on Senator Housley's question.
Is there anyone from the LBO's
Dean?
Hold on, Senator Housley, we want to see if there's someone from the LBO's office here. They may have been here earlier. Okay, Mr. Rowe, do you have any reaction to her question, or that's a question that you will reserve for the LBO as well? Oh, there. Are you from the LBO? I am. Okay, you were hiding from me over there. So if you'll come to the table and answer this question, that'd be great. And Senator Housley, thank you. I think this makes sense. Those who are not on finance have an opportunity to ask these important and critical questions.
Thank you.
If you identify yourself for the record and who you're with, and did you hear the question?
I did, yes.
Okay, go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Alyssa Holterman-Rosas, and I am a lead budget analyst with the LBO. To your question, Senator Housley, for the purposes of the fiscal note, they will often assume no growth, just because if they don't have a better way of sort of estimating what that growth is going to be, we encourage them to do that for the purposes of the fiscal note.
Senator Housley, follow up? Senator Housley.
Sorry, I was on mute. I forgot.
You were muted, okay.
Thank you. No, that is good. I do have another question, though.
Yep, go ahead.
So thank you. So if this is it's an insurance product, essentially. So what's the reserve needed to maintain solvency for this insurance product?
To testify, Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Housley, I think there's debate even within the insurance community and actuaries around that. The numbers I've seen have been generally around between a 3 to 6 month cushion. Reasonable actuaries, I believe, can disagree on that.
Senator Housley.
Okay. I have another one.
Yes, go
I had
ahead.
my hand raised for a while.
Far away.
Okay, again, on page 40 of the fiscal note, MMB says the
Page
executive
40, did you
branch-
say?
Am I on mute? No, I'm not.
No,
Okay.
page 40.
Executive branch per employee wages, inclusive of benefits, will grow by 2.4% annually, reflecting the average annual growth from 2011 to fiscal year 2022. And no growth is assumed after fiscal year 2023. What is the impact if that assumption isn't accurate?
To testify from LBO?
Mr. Chair and Senator Housley, I would have to go back to MMB with that question. I would assume that the impact of their premiums would increase as well. yeah, I'm sorry, I would have to go back to MMB. So I can follow up with them and get back to you, Senator Housley.
All right.
Thank you,
Rowe,
Mr.
it
Chair.
looks
I'm
like
just wondering if this means that the governor is not going to support wage and benefit increases for the executive branch employees in the future.
So, anyone has the answer to that question? Or was that more of a statement there, Senator Housley?
If someone can answer it, it would be great, Mr. Chair. It's a statement that if I could get an answer, would be great.
Anyone know if the governor, if it's being assumed that the governor is not going to recognize it for his employees? Is that what you said, Senator Housley?
Correct.
Anyone know the answer to that question? It seems no one knows the answer to that question. That's one of those questions that we will write down as well. Senator Housley.
And then this will be my last one, Mr. Chair, and then I'll have to watch the Finance Committee. But if the reserve level is 6 months of claims, that the amount needed is about $600 million. Is the joint budget target for paid family medical leave enough to cover that plus the startup costs?
Does anyone know the answer to that? Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair and Senator, could I ask just a quick clarifying question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Senator Housley, are you referring to the targets that were recently announced on Tuesday?
Yes.
Housley, Senator Housley. Mr. Rowe.
Oh, Mr. Chair, yes.
Mr. Chair, Senator, yes.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, so it is enough to cover both the startup costs and paid family leave and the target. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? And maybe I should go first to those people who are probably not on finance and then go to my good friend, Senator Pratt. Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Housley was kind of getting to my questions, too, about the reserve. And let's just take that conservative estimate, 3 months cushion. What would that be? 3 months of what? Is it the 1.5 million or 1.6 million? Or is it the startup cost? If you need the cushion is for the assumed liabilities. And so what is that 3-month cushion? I'll just take the conservative side here.
Mr. Rowe.
And Mr. Chair, Senator Nelson, just to clarify, which side of conservative? Do you want a bigger reserve for safety or a smaller reserve for safety?
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think we need both numbers. I was to be safer, you would have a 6-month cushion. If you were conservative, as Senator Mann is thinking that we got to get this thing passed tonight, you would be saying you want a 3-month cushion. So just give us both numbers.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, I basically 6 months is half a year. 3 months is 25% of a year. So I would basically say, if you take a look at page 9 of the fiscal note, that's the 2023 dollar value of the total anticipated leave costs under our modeling. 6 months would be about $507 million. 3 months would be 253.5.
Okay.
Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So did you say $507 million for the 6-month cost cushion reserve?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, that would be, yes, with some numbers trailing off on the end there, Senator.
Sure. And what did you say it was?
Nelson, you're going through the chair, is that right?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
Senator
Thank
Nelson.
you. Yes. And then for the 3-month cushion, the 3-month reserve, what would that be?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, again, I think that would be about $253 million or thereabouts, based on the $23 value on the table. But one could probably get more precise by.
Senator Nelson.
And then my final question on this set, Mr. Chair, is so is there enough in the for the startup costs, which I think are 600 and some million, and then the cushion, is there that much in the target for paid family medical leave? I just don't recall seeing $1.1 billion or $1.2 billion for that.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, the short answer to the question is yes. There's sufficient in the in the target. It wouldn't, the 6-month premium reserve plus the startup cost wouldn't be 1.1. It would be very close to the target.
Thank you.
Now, anyone else before we go back to my good friend, Senator Pratt? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm hoping I spur some additional questions around here, too. But, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, I appreciated Senator Gustafson's comments. I would remind the committee that, yes, fiscal notes get updated along the way as the new engrossments come. But never have I seen us try to move a bill out on a bill that was 5 engrossments behind, and this one made it even greater. So this to me is unprecedented. But Mr. Rose, standing, let's continue to talk about the reserve here a little bit, because I think this has been a really crucial piece of the discussion. So in statute, we have laid out what the reserve levels are for the unemployment. And this is very closely modeled after unemployment. Where do I see the statutory reserve levels in this bill?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, I think I would probably look towards the premium rate setting mechanism, which I'd have to take a look at the copy of the bill. Has a similar, though certainly not identical, mechanism to the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, where the bill recalculates the annual premium based on the reserve or based on the amount that's in the funds as a percentage, I believe, of claims.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I recall that took the claims times 1.45, and then you subtracted out what was in the balance as of September 30th, and you did, but it really doesn't talk about the fact that, unlike unemployment insurance where there's automatic surcharges, if the reserve falls below a certain level, there's no target reserve here. So to Senator Nelson, to follow up on Senator Nelson's questions, if we were to use unemployment as a basis, how many months of benefits are we holding in reserve? Because I believe we have about $1.7 billion in reserve in the unemployment fund. Is that correct?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, sorry, just to confirm, was that a question about the balance in the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund right now? Sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rowe, last session we brought the UI Trust Fund balance up to a point where there was no longer a surcharge, even though the fund is not considered fully reserved. And my question is, either at the fully reserved point or where we're at today, just as a basis for Senator Nelson's questions on how many months of claims do we have in reserve, how many months would the current reserve or a fully reserved UI trust fund pay out?
Mr. Rowe, I think we answered this question, but maybe I'm wrong. But if you didn't, Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I do want to just before I answer the question, just kind of want to separate. There's a conceptual difference here between a UI trust fund where it's highly cyclical, right? During a downturn, it tends, multiple people, more people go on unemployment, you're paying out benefits all sort of at once. So the reserve required to have a solvent UI trust fund is substantially higher. I'd have to check the exact figures from the U.S. Treasury, but I think that that fund is at 1.5 billion right now. The PFML program, however, you're not going to have as significant a level of cyclicality, and that has certainly been the experience in other states, right? Not everybody is going to have babies all in the same month or year. It's not tied to the economy, which is a cyclical element. It's tied to population health statistics, which tend to be much more consistent. There is some variability, to be sure, and that's why you have a reserve, but it's not variability akin to an unemployment insurance trust fund.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rowe, I'm not quite sure, and I've been listening, but maybe I missed it, because I've heard 6 months, I've heard 3 months, I've heard the reserve is set in the premium, but I've never really got a good sense of where your target reserve is, and shouldn't that be written into statute so that we have some basis when the actuarial study comes back to tell us whether or not we are, quite honestly, we should be waiting on this bill until we get the actuarial study, as Senator Nelson has made that point on several occasions tonight. But it seems like a miss here that we don't directly address the reserve. And so, Mr. Rowe, I'm just asking again, what is a sufficient reserve in your mind? In the department's opinion, I should say.
To the testifier.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, again, I think I discussed earlier, there are differences of perspective in terms of the actuarial community. I want to say that the actuarial report in Washington State, for example, said you could set it anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And there's, and I think there are reasonable policy approaches that one could take either way. Again, I think the bill does have a mechanism, that takes the previous year's worth of claims, which is effectively a way of looking at a reserve to recalculate the premium rate in that regard.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mr. Rowe, we've set a premium rate of 0.7. We've set a cap at 1.2% of covered wages. If I look at Colorado, I believe our benefit level is richer than Colorado, but they're at a 0.9% premium rate. If I look at Washington, I believe their benefit is not as rich as ours, and they're at a 0.8% premium rate. I'm assuming that you were involved in setting the 0.7% initial premium, and that in that you were looking at, because we are setting aside some money for claims at the beginning, unlike the last proposal where we were going to start collecting premium before claims could be paid out. I'm assuming at that 0.7 level, there is two things going on. We are paying out claims, and we are replenishing and building some sort of reserve. What is the target reserve?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I don't. I think I've answered the question previously, and I don't really have much more to say.
You have, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I think he answered it. So Senator Pratt, I hear the testifier saying, if we're in court, the judge would say that we're being argumentative, and that's not what we want to do, right? So if he's answered the question, we don't mind us asking and answering a new question, but I just would hope that we could continue to go forward. Mr. Roy?
And just to try to be helpful, Mr. Chair and Senator, again, I would just note the fiscal note, based on the revenue projections, based on the items that we got from the Department of Revenue, and the claims and the benefits data that, the benefits projections that the department undertook, demonstrate that there would be sufficient resources with the 0.7% tax, with the 0.7% premium rate to cover the benefits projected under the modeling. So that's another way to look at it.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I don't mean to be argumentative, but it seems to me there's kind of a we don't know, not a real firm target. I'd like to follow up on a comment that Mr. Rowe made about the fact that we expect these not to have the catastrophic events. Mr. Rowe, let's say we did have a catastrophic event. We had a natural disaster. We had a terrorist attack. We had something that caused a number of people to be injured and a number of people to need to take claims, to make claims in order to care for those injured folks. Might be a tornado or something along that line. If the claims were to exceed the reserve, unlike unemployment insurance, we can't go to the federal government for a loan. Where would what would happen if claims exceeded the money in reserve?
Mr. Roy, before you answer, I would hope that we as Minnesotans, first of all, I know that we fight together and we figure out exactly what we're going to do together if there was some catastrophic event, some disaster. So I just want to make sure that I'm standing up for, like you, stand up for us as Minnesotans, what we do whenever we face some uncertainty. But the question is well founded. Mr. Roy.
Mr. Chair, Senator, I'm not sure that the bill contemplates meteorite or other such event striking the state. I imagine it would be a matter of public policy. It would be a matter of public policy debate for the legislature to review and provide guidance to the administration.
And just like we did with COVID, COVID was something that came out of nowhere, and I know that we sometimes feel very differently about it, but just as a state and a legislature, when we were faced with that unprecedented set of circumstances, we really came together and tried to figure out a pathway forward. So I just would hope that we don't forget that, because there's some things we can predict and some things that we can't. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, and as you all know, I have a background in financial services and finance, and looking back at 2008, one of the key tipping points in 2008 leading into the financial crisis was the failure of AIG as an insurer to have sufficient liquidity in order to pay claims, which then led to the downfall of Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers and so on and so forth. And now we're having similar problems with liquidity when it comes to Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank and other regional banks that are finding themselves in tight liquidity. And so if this were, and as we review and rate insurance programs, one of the key metrics that AM Best looks at is what is your reserve level? What are the funds that you have on hand to pay claims? And we can expect that, just like auto insurance, we would expect these claims to go along. And Mr. Chair, I think what I hear you and Mr. Rowe say is that unlike a private insurer that would be required to maintain sufficient reserves, if there were a catastrophic event that drained the benefits reserve, that it would fall on the taxpayers of Minnesota. Now, I understand that we'd all come together and we'd rally behind that, and I'd be out, just like I was in 2014, I'd be putting up, when we were flooding, I was putting up sandbags. We all come together. But there is a financial aspect to this to say that we have to have reserves, because we're going to end up having to fund potentially reconstruction or some sort of other responses that typically come with a peacetime emergency. And I'm concerned because the heart of this is a financial product. And it doesn't feel like we have the finances nailed down. And that's why I'm asking, what we're basically saying, and unlike the unemployment insurance where we could go get a loan and cover those benefits, we don't have that same opportunity here.
Well, Senator Pratt, I really understand your point, but I think what we need to be really clear about is AIG is one of the examples that you gave, with Goldman Sachs and all the others who were high finance people who came up with this whole idea that they could protect the risk, and they had it all figured out. And guess what happened? There was a challenge that happened. And when that challenge happened, the federal government and others stepped in. Silicon Valley, the FDIC stepped in to say, hey, all you great minds that thought you had it figured out with the risk and everything else, you didn't. So the government stepped in. All I'm suggesting is this, is as we are debating this issue, I think we are mixing apples and oranges when we think in terms of risk, instead of understanding that there is some risk, but we go into this with a real sense of what we need to do in order to make sure that we're able to go forward. And I think Senator Mann and the others have done a good job of that. And there's still an opportunity for when we get to finance, so that we can see the engrossments, so that we can see anything else, and we can continue to have this robust and important discussion. But I just don't think we should mix apples and oranges when we think in terms of risk, because even on the private side of the equation, and we respect them, as on the public side of the equation, sometimes we thought some banks were too big to fail, didn't we? And they did so. And we had to what? Use taxpayer dollars in order to bring them forward. I'm just saying, I just hope that we don't forget that, because what happens when we come in situations like this, we forget that, and I just don't want us to forget that. And I know you don't forget anything because you have a great memory. But with that being said,
Well, thank you, Mr.
is there
Chair.
anything else?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Senator Pratt?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I thought Senator Nelson had a quick question.
Her light works again. I'm just really upset about this.
I
don't know how
can
I'm
see
gonna
it
deal
from
with
where I
this.
sit.
Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Seriously, Mr. Rowe, I am so glad you are here because, and I don't sit on finance, so just bear with me a little bit on a couple of my questions here that I think are really important, because we did talk about the actuarial piece of this, that is so very, very important. And you've given some numbers that have been helpful to understand a little bit. And the one thing that I don't know if it's been addressed here in the 64 fiscal note, but if it has, you would know, or maybe, the way that you get to sustainability in an insurance product like this is, as I mentioned, you have to assess the risks and charge the appropriate premium for the risk that you're taking on, and that's kind of what we're doing here. And the one thing I haven't heard about is what's the average length of leave? Like, so as the actuaries, well, maybe it's not exactly actuaries, but as you were making, so what were your assumptions? So what was your assumption about the average length of leave that kind of came to these numbers? Like, to get these benefits, this is what the cost has to be.
Mr. Rowan?
Mr. Chair and Senator Nelson, so the way that the Worker Plus model, which was the modeling tool that we used from the United States Department of Labor, specific for this purpose of estimating paid family medical leave benefits, works, is actually I would say that the duration of leave is actually an output, because it actually takes a population level approach, takes census data, takes FMLA data, and then takes the incidence data, which is noted on page 9 of the fiscal note. And then it essentially runs a very detailed simulation to simulate how likely workers would be to take leave under the specific parameters of such a program. So one feeds in the length of the potential duration of leave that a worker could be eligible for, the financial parameters of said program, and a variety of other elements which are contained in the fiscal note. And then essentially for each program, it outputs, there's an output for kind of an anticipated length of claim taken. So as I think I said previously, the output is different for each type of program, and I'd have to kind of pull up the detailed notes around that. But I would say, again, just conceptually, programs like Own Health Leave, where you're taking leave for yourself, and this is confirmed by the experience in other states, tend to see higher durations of leave than, say, again, an example of qualifying exigency leave when you're supporting a family member who's in the military. Those tend to just kind of naturally be shorter.
And I want to make sure that I get your last name right. It looks like I called you Mr. Rowan last time instead of Mr. Rowe, so accept my apologies for that. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Rowe, I am so very glad you're here. So, see, if I remember correctly, I think in last year's bill, there was an average length of incident. And why wasn't that included in this fiscal note, or was it not calculated, or, there's just a difference between, last year there was a average length, and now there's not, or that we could tell specifically. So what do you know about that?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, so two things. I didn't personally do the last one, so I don't know the entire answer. The model that we used was recently updated from the U.S. Department of Labor. So I just have, I think they literally just updated it earlier this year. So I'd have to double check on some of those outputs.
Thank you.
Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chair, just a little bit of a follow-up. And just if you can kind of pull out for me by claim type, what's the average length? That would be good to know, especially when I was talking about maternity benefits.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, I don't have that right in front of me, but I'd be happy to follow up.
Thank you.
Senator Nelson, he will
Thank
follow
you.
up. Thank you for that. Senator Pratt, any follow-up?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Mann, I was looking at page 14, lines 14.5 and 14.6, and I think this goes back to some of my confusion around intermittent leave. And so we talk about a period of incapacity of more than 3 calendar days. If we go down to 14.7, 14.8, it talks about treatment 2 or more times by a healthcare provider. Now, I can't, you and I have talked about my daughter and becoming a physical therapist, and I appreciate the advice that you gave her. But I'm thinking about that is if somebody goes to a physical therapist twice a week, does that count as, is that the 2 or more times to create a claimable event? And then kind of back to this intermittent, right? I'm going twice a week and I'm getting this benefit, and I've got 12 weeks of benefit, but I'm really only using 2 days. Are we really saying that I've got 60 days of benefit rather than 12 weeks, or how does that work when I'm dealing with somebody like, let's say, a physical therapist?
Senator Mann.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Senator Pratt. So again, to qualify for leave, you need 7 days of incapacity. So 7 straight days that are consecutive, or they need not be consecutive for intermittent leave. So you would have to have a physician write you a note saying that for whatever reason, you cannot work for 7 days to qualify for leave in the first place. Then after that, so say you shatter your spine and you are off of work for a month, and then part of your recovery, you go to physical therapy twice a week. Those twice a week days are part of your recovery, are part of your 7-day qualifying event, so they would qualify for leave. And again, because you're taking leave now on an intermittent basis, that leave time would be prorated.
Thank you.
Senator Pratt.
You know, Mr. Chair, there's a lot of questions here. And these are questions that I tried to ask in 2019 when, I was cut off from questioning. And the hour is getting late. I'll make a couple of quick comments. Back to the question that to your response about the reserve. Yeah, the government did step in and they bailed out some of those folks. AIG failed, Lehman failed, right? They no longer exist. But I think we can agree that we don't want to have to bail these people out, and that we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's one of the concerns I have. I would dare say that you and I probably are more in agreement when it comes to these bailouts than different. But Mr. Chair, we really should have passed Senate File 3885 last year. Now, this was a program that Senator Coleman and I designed that would have relied on third-party insurance providers, not putting the state on the hook, not putting the Minnesota taxpayer on the hook. Because if this fund, according to testimony tonight, were to be under reserve for the claims that it needs, if it lacked the liquidity to pay those claims, we would have to go to the Minnesota taxpayer and recoup that. And if we don't have enough money on the bottom line, and I think if I recall, we're leaving somewhere around $100 million in fiscal 26, 27 on the bottom line from the targets that were released, we could easily surpass, if there were a catastrophic event, the types of claims that we're talking about. We're not going to suspend the program. $38.85 received tripartisan support. We had Republicans, we had Democrats, and we had independents vote for that bill, because it recognized that the reason some people don't have paid family and medical leave is that the Department of Commerce does not have the authority to allow someone to come in and write those policies today. Third party can't come in and write a family leave policy. So we don't know what the private market would have done. To Senator Nelson's point, had we provided a carrot versus a stick approach, we don't know how many small employers would have jumped on board, because we are still about 100,000 people short in the workforce than where we started in February of 2020. And everybody is fighting for human talent. And the small guys were struggling because the big corporations that I used to work for, they could afford to have a policy. They could afford to have a program. Little mom and shop couldn't. You know, I'll take my favorite brewery. I've got a couple of them, so I won't name them. But let's say one of my favorite breweries in my district.
Oh, maybe you want to tell us that favorite brewery so you can put that on the record.
I'll rattle them. I've got a list of them, Mr. Chair. They couldn't compete for workers, but and what Senator Nelson and Senator Coleman and I put together would have allowed them to compete for that workforce. And I'm so glad Senator Mann said this fiscal note is inaccurate, because it is inaccurate. And yet this is the committee of jurisdiction. And it is absolutely inappropriate and irresponsible of us to pass this bill out without an accurate fiscal note. That we have missed 5 engrossments along the way. Mr. Rose says he thinks we got enough money in the target. If I understand the targets right, Mr. Chair, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we've got about $990 million in the target, but $500 million of that is set aside for IIJA, so your net target is about $490 million. $490 million to stand this program up and seed the reserve fund. Doesn't sound like a lot to me with everything else that we're looking at doing. There are some other questions I was going to ask Senator Mann around oversight, because we asked the Commissioner of Deed to evaluate and take corrective action on private employers who opt out and become self-insured, and yet we're asking, my question to that would have been, do we have a conflict of interest? We have the Commissioner of Deed, who is running the state program, making decisions on other programs when it should be the insurance commissioner of the state, the Commissioner of Commerce, that should be looking at that. We require private insurers to have a surety bond But the state of Minnesota doesn't need a surety bond. We're just going to rely on the taxpayer of Minnesota to cover any losses in the reserve. And, you know, there was one thing that Senator Mann talked about when she said, we keep talking about the cost of business. And Senator Mann, I hope we can agree on this. It doesn't matter whether the employer or the employee is paying this premium. It's being borne by the employee. It's a pass-through. It's either going to result in lower wages or it's going to result in fewer opportunities. Somebody's going to try to decide whether or not they want to hire that extra person to come on board. Ultimately, the entire premium is pushed down to the employee. And so when we talk about the cost of business, we're actually talking about the cost of the employee. Mr. Chair, I'm not going to remake the motion because it already failed, and I know how to count noses, and I don't have enough noses to lay this thing on the table. But I am really disappointed in where this committee is, that we are so pushing this thing through so quickly with inaccurate information to make a deadline so that we don't have to go make a stop at our Rules Committee. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're here tonight. Because if we were really trying to pass out a bill and put the Job Committee stamp of approval on this, we would have an accurate fiscal note. So, Mr. Chair, I'm gonna be a no tonight because I think this has been a bad process along the way, and I would encourage members to vote no, and let's do this thing right. We've got time.
So thank you, Senator Pratt. Just a couple things before I go to Senator Nelson, and just so that we're clear, after Senator Nelson says her statement, then I want to go to the author for final words, okay? And so I want to make sure that we're all okay with that process, because I don't want us to, you know, think of something else and then jump back in over and over again. I think we'll have more than enough time to continue to debate this. One of the things that was significant that Senator Mann said was how many committees this bill has gone through. And she didn't say how many individual meetings that she took with a cross-section of people in order to make sure she was listening. What I believe I also heard was Senator Mann saying, as a result of those interactions from chambers and from business owners and from others, I took some of that information, because I'm open-minded, and I put it here. I think that's important. In fact, we saw that tonight.
Yes, we did.
When we look at the A85 amendment, you Senator Pratt, put forward this actuarial study, and in fact, in that A85 amendment, it says that the commissioner must present options to the legislature to adjust the program to make the program actuarially sound. Forgive me for that word there. I sometimes get tied-tongued, especially at this hour. But I'm thinking clearly. So, to me, we just have to think about the fact that this program is not just a benefit to workers, it's a benefit to employers, because workers are looking for competitive, options and benefits that both can share. And one thing, Senator Pratt, I hope that you look at is the targets. There's a separate target for paid family medical leave. I want to make sure that we're not confusing our target for paid family medical leave, because it has its own separate target, right? And I do think that we will get a chance to continue down this road when we think in terms of finances, because you're on the Finance Committee, I'm on the Finance Committee, Senator Muhammad is on that committee, and I don't know who else is on that committee, but we'll continue to take this discussion there, and we'll be in a great position to pass a bill that's been around for a long time. This is not a new idea, right? And so that's what I want to say about that. And so, Senator Nelson, if you'll go and state your thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And then we'll go on to Senator.
And I do greatly appreciate the time that we've been able to discuss this very important bill. And I have no doubt, Senator Mann, that you have worked incredibly hard on this. You have had more meetings than we could imagine. And I do appreciate the changes that you've made along the way. Absolutely. But I will be a no vote tonight because the thing is, people are concerned about losing benefits. This particular proposal, while well-intended, is actually going to cause people to lose benefits that they have now. And the employers will lose the flexibility to design plans that meet the very specific needs of their employees. And we've had some of that discussion tonight. And then it's clear that we don't really know exactly what this is going to cost. And I'm concerned about that. We've already seen the payroll tax in just some of the reiterations of the bill or amendments go up in cost to employees or their employers. And we did that again tonight on a couple amendments. Things that we thought were important, we added those. And so that also makes the estimated premiums not sufficient to cover the increased benefits that we added today. Oh, excuse me, my mother's calling me. And so there are many questions still. And I'm concerned because there are those questions, and I'm concerned that people are going to lose benefits that they like. And the bigger thing is we don't know exactly how much this big government program is going to cost. And our schools and our counties, our cities, our state government, all are going to have increased costs because of this. And that's a cost to the taxpayers, but we're not totally sure how much it is. So those things, just cause me great pause. And Mr. Chair, you're right. We have been working on this for a number of years. And I mentioned earlier that I've been working on this since 2019, which was with the carrot approach. And I won't elaborate that again. But the carrot approach, which would have encouraged employers to provide. And so with that, I just remain convinced there's a better way, Mr. Chair, Senator Mann. That's what I've heard from our school districts. This was unsolicited that I got this information. They're concerned we've already got the information from the counties. It's increasing property taxes. They're estimating a 0.25% to 1% increase in property taxes just to pay for paid family leave. We're also hearing that, you know what? They're not very crazy about the fact that they've already negotiated benefits, and now this comes along. So we're not. I just think it's well intended, but it's missing the mark tonight, and so I will be a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. With that being said, we're now going to the author for final comments before we vote. Senator Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to reply to a couple of the comments, we talk about the concern that people will lose benefits. The people who have benefits to lose are the highest paid workers in the entire state. The vast majority of people are not included in that statement. And again, this program does not create a need for leave. That need already exists. This bill simply treats the way or changes the way we treat people when they go on leave, so that we keep families in Minnesota economically stable. One comment that was made that was done erroneously is that DEED has oversight in the program, and it's a conflict of interest. DEED does not have the oversight, it's Commerce and DLI. And I don't agree with the statement that the cost will be borne by the workers, because again, the vast majority of workers that we are talking about are the ones that are excluded from these programs in the first place. We talk about how we cannot do this the way it is written. Every other country in the world does it. It is not a new idea. It is not a new program. And now, of course, we have 11 other states to go on. The program is proven to work. So we are not having a conversation about whether or not it can be executed. We are now having a philosophical conversation of whether or not we should do it. And what is the alternative to not doing it? We tell women to go back to work 2 weeks postpartum, like we're doing right now. 25% of women go back to work 2 weeks postpartum. Bleeding, not having more than 3 hours of sleep at a time. And of course, this disproportionately affects women of color and our BIPOC communities. And we keep telling people that their worth is based on their productivity, and their worth is based on directly what they can produce and contribute to the workforce. And when are we going to stop doing that? People are worth more than their productivity. And so this bill has been around for years. This is not new. We are not pushing it through. We are doing this slowly, very slowly, in fact, I would argue too slowly, and very thoughtfully. And I ask for your support.
Thank you, Senator Mann. Thank you to the committee. Thank you for all the staff, for all the folks who have worked so hard on this bill. We know that it still has a number of stops. One is going to finance, and then it's going on, hopefully, from there to the floor for us to have even more rich debate around this important piece of policy. With that being said, Senator Muhammad makes the motion. Yes, Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was my understanding the route for this bill was supposed to be taxes. Am I mistaken?
Yes, thank you for the question. That is mistaken. Senator Rest did send a note saying that it does not need to be seen in taxes, that it should go to finance. That was a direct note from the chair of taxes to all of us. Thank you. With that being said, Senator Muhammad moves that Senate File 2, as amended, should pass, recommend to pass, and re-referred to finance.
So moved.
Mr. Chair?
All right, all those in favor say,
Go ahead.
Senator Housley, did you have a question?
I just wanted to amend the motion, so we'll pass this motion, and then I was wondering if I could amend it to pass it without recommendation.
So the first motion then will be that Senator Housley moves that Senate File 2 should be passed with no recommendations and re-referred to finance. That's the amended motion, and if this fails, then we'll go to the original motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. The motion does not prevail. Now we're under underlining motion, Senator Muhammad's motion. Seeing no additional discussion, all those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed say no.
No.
The motion prevails, and Senate File 2 passes and is recommended. Senate File 2 passes and is re-referred to finance. As amended. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That was a lot of words, but I got them out. With that being said, members, we now have our next meeting scheduled for next week. Make sure that you take a look at the calendar. We will now move to passing our finance omnibus bill. So there will be a lot of discussion about that. We're putting that together, and we'll certainly give notice and make sure all the information is discussed with the ranking members as well, and then for the rest of the committee. Any questions about the work that we'll have next week? Seeing none, the committee is now adjourned.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I had to get that last.